This is a CNN Election 2000 special presentation. Election Day, the day to choose a new president for a new century. At the start of the last century, democracy was staggered by assassination. But the system endured and matured through the Great War, the Great Depression, and more war, some of it hot and horrifying, and one of them cold and terrifying. Through a pivotal decade of redefinition and deep division at home and abroad. Through executive scandal and the confusing contrast of tragedy and triumph. And into a final decade, both prosperous and notorious. Today, America is again forging its future by choosing the man to lead it into the 21st century. This is CNN's coverage of Election 2000. Now, from the election desk, here are Judy Woodruff, Bernard Shaw, Jeff Greenfield, and Bill Schneider.
And welcome to viewers around the world watching on CNN International. Thank you for joining us as we begin what promises to be a remarkable and a suspenseful evening.
As voting continues literally at this hour and will continue across the nation, there is every indication that George W. Bush and Al Gore are indeed locked in a presidential race that may be too close to call for hours. Jeff Greenfield, our senior analyst, this is the kind of election those of us who love politics have been living for.
If you've ever wanted, Judy, and folks out there, if you've ever longed for those nights that you've heard about when people waited late to find out who their leader was, pull up a chair. This may be it. If you want to know how tight this presidential race is, you have only to know this. This afternoon, the Al Gore campaign dispatched Reverend Jesse Jackson to Pennsylvania at this hour to try to increase the turnout among core Democratic constituencies. They asked Senator Ted Kennedy to dispatch 100 of his advisors and supporters, union people, labor activists, environmentalists, up across the border to New Hampshire, where that race is apparently so tight. The presidential race we are hearing, Senate race after Senate race, we simply do not know. It's an election like we haven't seen in decades.
And Bill Schneider, people are leaving the polling booths. How can we characterize some of the things you're saying?
Well, I think we can say that voters in this election, it's very unusual. They're very two-minded. They are of two minds. You know, in any election in this country, usually one of two themes dominates. Either people say, we've never had it so good, or they say it's time for a change. What's really rare is for people to believe both. And they do. They believe they've never had it so good. Their financial situation is good. They've never seen an economy this good. On the other hand, they want a change of leadership. A change of leadership, but not a change of direction. And I think it all stems from their views of Bill Clinton, the president. He gets a very high job rating, which ought to elect Al Gore, but a very low personal approval rating, so people want a change of leadership.
Feels like a long night.
All right, well, Al Gore and George W. Bush, speaking of the candidates for the major parties, are right now at their home bases in Tennessee and in Texas. They are waiting for the election results to roll in. Our John King is with the Gore campaign in Nashville. Candy Crowley is with the Bush camp in Austin. And let's go to John King first.
Well, Judy, no rest for the vice president this afternoon, despite a 30-hour campaign marathon finale. He is here at a hotel in Tennessee. Aides frantically working the phones, checking in with operatives in key battleground states, heartened by what they hear in some, discouraged by what they hear in others. As all this plays out, a man who has spent the last 24 years in federal public office waiting and watching for the results here in his home state of Tennessee.
District 8, Precinct 1, Elmwood, Tennessee. Count 1 for Al Gore. Make that 2.
And I voted for my husband, Al Gore. How's that? And it was a thrill. It was wonderful. It was very exciting.
It was a signature day in the life. The son of a legendary Tennessee senator, born to be president, his father once said, looking for one last promotion after 8 years in the House, 8 in the Senate, and 8 as the vice president. It is tradition for Mr. Gore to speak to the Forks River School students after voting, and this year was both no different and very different all at once. Same playful small talk.
That's part of what freedom is all about. You can pick anybody you want to. What kind of person do you want to pick?
My friend.
A much bigger audience.
Would you all like to wave to them? All right, now wait a second. Let's do it on 3. 1, 2, 3.
That Tennessee support was in question said it all. Mr. Gore voiced confidence he would win the White House, but aides acknowledged there was little room for error in their electoral strategy. Caffeine was in order after campaigning all night. This Tampa reunion with running mate Joe Lieberman, the final offensive in the fight for Florida and its 25 electoral votes.
This is the last official stop of Campaign 2000. It's not an accident that it's here in Tampa. It's not an accident that it's in West Central Florida, because Florida may very well be the state that decides the outcome of this election.
We win Florida and we win, period, was the view of the Gore camp. This 1 a.m. rally in South Beach, Miami, complete with Hollywood luminaries and oceanside fireworks. And one last bid to frame the nation's choice.
I remember well the deficits and the debt, the unemployment and the higher crime, the family breakups and the repeat recessions. Thank you for giving me and Bill Clinton a chance to bring some economic change to America, and because of that, we now have a stronger economy.
If Florida goes Republican, the vice president would need to win most of the remaining late campaign battlegrounds. Washington and Oregon in the West, Iowa, Minnesota, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and West Virginia in the heartland. Turnout was the focus in the frantic final hours. African American support in places like Flint, Michigan is critical. The muscle-organized labor flexes in an unprecedented turnout drive, the biggest weapon for the Democrats across the Midwestern battlegrounds.
Now the vice president with some help from the boss, President Clinton, working the phones, calling radio shows deep into the afternoon, trying to encourage turnout, especially among African Americans. We're also told by sources in the labor movement, organized labor has redirected several major national phone banks into the state of Pennsylvania, looking perhaps to redirect resources into several other Midwestern states as well. Everyone here expecting this race will be very tight to the end. The vice president himself predicting we may not know the winner until sometime Wednesday. Judy?
All right, John, and we're going to ask you to stand by right now because we want to go to Candy Crowley, who has been covering this entire year, the Bush campaign right now. She is in Austin. Candy.
Judy, George Bush got up this morning after what he called 5 hours of solid sleep and did his morning routine. He made coffee and took it to his wife and then, as he said, talked to the pets. After that, there is really little else to do at this point except what millions of other Americans are doing.
Same address. Hopefully soon to change.
George and Laura Bush of Austin, Texas voted Tuesday, just another couple of voters, albeit with a vested interest.
Tina, this is George W. Bush calling from Austin, Texas. Yeah, well, only in America. Well, thank you. Listen, I'm calling. Part of my hopes is that as many people as possible will vote. Obviously, I hope they vote for me, and I'm calling to urge you to get to the polls today.
One candidate, one voter, an intimate final effort in a campaign that began with soaring poll numbers and great confidence 17 months ago, and ended last night with tight poll numbers and great confidence.
And if the people do what I think they're going to do, you're looking at the next president of the United States.
Despite the bravado, the schedule over the last 48 hours reflected a major worry. Florida, home of Governor Jeb Bush.
And when he looked me in the eye and said, Florida is going to be Bush Cheney country, I believe him. Now, we're traveling your big state today with one message. Let's get out to vote.
Most experts can't figure a victory for the Republican nominee that doesn't include Florida. Bush strategists say otherwise, but the fact they spent 24 of the last 48 hours there tells you something. Monday, Bush's itinerary reached into 4 states that have not voted Republican since Ronald Reagan. The journey was bookended by stops as symbolic as they were electorally significant. Tennessee, Al Gore's home state, and George Bush's last stop of Campaign 2000, Bill Clinton's Arkansas.
And we're here to declare we're going to carry Arkansas tomorrow.
The visit represented the fondest hopes of a campaign that, in the end, believes it fought the good fight.
I believe, we poured our hearts and souls in this campaign. The organization here in Austin and around the country have worked hard, and the people are going to decide. And I trust the people. I trust their will and trust their wisdom.
At this point, the word those closest to Bush used to describe his mood is serene. Look, said one of his closest friends, he's a competitor, and if he should lose, we don't think he will, but if he should, he's not going to like it. But he is serene, and he will accept that. Judy?
All right, Candy, I want to ask both you and John a question. John, to you first. You said that the people around Mr. Gore are heartened by some news they're getting, discouraged by others. You want to share that with us?
Well, Judy, they're checking in with operatives in key states. Again, organized labor, the key engine of Democratic turnout. They're looking at the states Candy just mentioned the vice president is focused on. If the vice president wins Florida, he believes that gives him a cushion to lose one or two states that might be considered reliably Democratic but have been battlegrounds this year. Look at West Virginia, look at Missouri, look at Iowa, look at Wisconsin. Those are the biggest worries in the Gore campaign. They believe they've solidified things on the West Coast. Oregon's still a bit of a worry. They think California and Washington are in the bag, but they're worried now if they lose even these 11 electoral votes right here in Tennessee, that they have to make them up elsewhere. Losing states like Iowa and Wisconsin that voted for Clinton Gore twice could be devastating. We started this campaign saying the big battlegrounds would decide it. We might end it looking at some of the very small states making the difference. That's what the campaign's worried about, even now, still pouring resources into some of those states. Judy?
And conversely, Candy, as you talk to the people around Governor Bush, what is on their mind? What are they worried about?
Well, you know, they're watching turnout. They think that's obviously key, as the Gore camp does. They're watching some of the key states, but you've got to believe they are zeroed in on Florida. They believe they can put together a victory without Florida, but it'll be a whole heck of a lot easier for them if they have Florida in the bag. I think that's the one that worries the most. That and Michigan they're also keeping an eye on.
All right, Candy and John, and we're going to be coming back to both of you throughout this long night. So thank you both, and be braced for a long one. Bernie.
Voter turnout, key to this election. Coming up, we will visit precincts in 3 crucial states. And we're going to talk with Kwesi Mfume and Pat Robertson.
Coverage of Election 2000 is brought to you by Chrysler and Paine-Webber. For expanded coverage, log on to CNN.com. Chrysler, we're reinventing the passion for driving. And Paine-Webber, thank you, Paine-Webber.
The whole world watches as a single step becomes a giant leap for mankind.
Transportation advances again. The re-engineered, redesigned Chrysler Town & Country. The best minivan ever.
How many experts does it take to predict a market change?
Tickets, folks. I'm out.
Tax laws have changed. Should I be looking at my estate plan again?
Anyone who knows me wouldn't recommend a stock like this.
Oh, not again. This guy.
Investment strategies for you. Great. Just for me and 5 million other people.
Thank you, Paine-Webber.
Alzheimer's disease takes billions of healthy brain cells and slowly turns them into a tangled web. At our pharmaceutical company, we're trying to remove the amyloid plaque from the brain of the Alzheimer patient. And we are developing a vaccine that activates the immune system to help remove that plaque. My hope is that nobody's parent or grandparent will ever suffer from this disease again.
The internet is faster because of us.
The internet is more reliable because of us.
The internet is growing because of us.
The internet is more exciting because of us.
The internet goes everywhere because of us.
The internet is better because of us.
Delivering the most content from the world's biggest network, Akamai.
Got yourself into too much credit card debt? Why not point and click your way out of debt with a second mortgage from Ditech.com? Whether you have equity or no equity, good credit or not so good credit, Ditech has a second mortgage with absolutely no closing costs to help you lower your monthly payments now. So point and click your way out of high-interest, non-tax deductible credit card debt at Ditech.com or call us at 1-800-71-FIX.
Turnout has been cited as one of the keys to today's election, and with that in mind, we are going to touch base now with our reporters at precincts in 3 key states. Maria Hinojosa is in New York, Jeff Flock is in Aurora, Illinois, and Greg Lamont in Rancho Mirage, California. And let's begin with Maria in New York.
Well, Judy, turnout has been steady since 6 a.m. Eastern time here in this polling place in the basement of a school on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, where most of the voters we've seen today have been voters of color, Latinos, African Americans, and some immigrants, first-time voters. Now, both the Democrats and the Republicans say that they are closely watching the turnout of people of color. In several key battleground states, African American voters make up anywhere from 10 to 30% of the electorate, and Democrats say they could swing those states, such as Pennsylvania and Michigan. Here in New York, we spoke to some voters of color who told us their reasons for who they voted for.
We need them to be a Democrat to be reelected. It's very important for a lot of minority people.
I generally believe in the Republican conservative philosophy of self-help and self-reliance, and I feel that it is in Latin people's best interest to vote that way.
A lot of the people in my building in particular are voting for Al Gore because they're scared that George Bush would just take away their Social Security. A lot of these people are older immigrants from Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, from the Caribbean, and they don't know anything about investing their money or just things like that.
And also the Latino vote being watched closely by both the Democrats and Republicans. Republicans saying they want 30% nationally, Democrats saying they'll take the majority. That's it for the East Coast. For a look at what's happening on the Midwest, we go to my colleague Jeff Flock in Aurora, Illinois.
Indeed, Maria, Precinct 4, Ward 1, downtown Aurora, Illinois. This is the heavily Republican Kane County, where the Kane County county clerk tells CNN the turnout is pegged at between 80 and 85%. Obviously, the question is, where will the turnout be, Republican or Democratic counties? We also asked voters as they came away from the polls today how they made up their minds.
I think I kept hoping that there would be some point in time at which something would be said, something would happen that would make it very clear to me which direction was the best fit for me, and that really never happened.
It seemed as if the Bush party, the Republican Party, was so focused on money. So I asked myself, if I had an extra $10,000 to an extra $100,000, what difference would that make in my life, and what difference would it make that other people wouldn't have some public policies cut or, public services cut? And I said, well, I can certainly go without the money, and I'm sure other people could not go with some of the benefits that they are receiving, and that's how come I went with the Democratic Party.
The Lake County clerk tells me that already, in talking to some of the campaigns report that already over 100% of their likely voters have already voted. That means that all these polls that are based on likely voters may be just out the window, and we may have a race that is truly up for grabs. We'll continue to watch it. That is the latest from Aurora, Illinois. Now on out to the West Coast, where Greg Lamont is standing by. Greg.
Well, Jeff, voters here in Riverside County, California, about 50 miles east of Los Angeles, are getting a chance to literally touch the future when it comes to voting. Touchscreen voting booths have been installed throughout the county for the 600,000 registered voters here. It is extraordinarily simple. There's no pencils, no punch cards, no paper ballots, only your finger. It starts off right over here where voters come in. They register with the registrar's table right here. They are handed a card that looks very similar to a bank card. They take that card that you see being handed right there, and eventually they will walk over here to these touchscreen voting booths. What you do with that card that she was handed is you slide it right into this slot right here. Up on the screen pops the list of candidates and any propositions that may be involved in the election. You press them, you push that you want to vote, and you are done. There's even an area where you can write in candidates' names. This is the largest election in U.S. history using electronic touchscreen voting, and the people using these touch screens really seem to like them.
I thought it was fabulous, very easy to read, especially for older people. I didn't even have to put my glasses on.
It was fast, it was rapid, and I was prepared. If I hadn't been prepared, I think it may have been a little confusing.
Well, I thought it was a good innovation. It's easy to use, straightforward, and if you come prepared, it's very quick.
The voter registrar here in the county says it will cut in half the time that it takes to tally all of the votes. Bernie?
Okay, thank you very much. Joining us now, Christian Coalition President Pat Robertson. He's with us from Virginia Beach, Virginia. We had hoped to have Kwesi Mfume, the president and CEO of the NAACP from Baltimore. We're looking forward to talking to him a little bit later in this hour. Reverend Robertson, what kind of muscle and money have you poured into this Get Out the Vote effort?
Bernie, it's unprecedented what we've done. It's probably double to even triple anything we've ever done in the past. We have distributed 70 million voter guides that have on the first page the presidential issues, 14 of them, and on the back the key congressional or Senate races in the respective states. In addition, we've got 5 million voter guides going out to the Hispanic community in Spanish. And then we're making 1 million telephone calls. For example, in Oregon, we've made 100,000 calls to those people who have not voted. They're voting by mail in Oregon, and so we had a list of people who hadn't yet voted, so it was a Get Out the Vote call. So it's unprecedented for us.
On these voter guides, have you put to rest people's criticism from some quarters that you're violating campaign law?
Well, 2 judges did that, Bernie. One judge ruled against the FEC very clearly, Judge Joyce Greens in Washington, and then a federal district judge in Norfolk ruled against the IRS. We sued the IRS, and in both cases won decisive victories, and so there's no question that these things are in totally conformity with the election laws and with the Internal Revenue Service Code.
Is there any anti-Clinton feeling propelling your folks to the polls today?
Bernie, I don't think there's any question about it. The overriding issue for the religious community is the moral climate of our nation, and the things that have happened in the White House are repugnant to them. I think many people admire Clinton for his brilliance in government, but nevertheless the personal life is repugnant. I think beyond that, there's several other issues that are driving them, but I would say the whole concept of big government, the excess spending, the waste in Washington is a major factor, and as one of the respondents said on your program just earlier, that the whole concept of individual initiative versus government solutions to problems. These are major issues for us.
Now let's go to the ground in the battleground states. Exactly what are you doing even at this hour in places such as Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, Missouri?
I visited Missouri 3 times just a few days ago. I was in Springfield, I was in St. Louis, I was in Kansas City with major rallies. We have I think, if memory serves me right, 1.5 million voter guides going out in Missouri. We have a significant effort in Michigan going on. There are people at the polls right now, and they have been passing out voter guides. I was out Sunday in Arkansas. I think Arkansas is going to be a key state, and we have a significant effort in Arkansas, also Tennessee. It seems like to me these states, these little states that we never thought too much about, may hold the key to this election. Tennessee.
Indeed they might.
Arkansas, Missouri. We've been active in all of them.
Well, thanks very much, Reverend Robertson, for joining us. It's going to be a long night.
It sure will.
And later on, we hope to hear from Kwesi Mfume, president of the NAACP. Judy?
Well, that's 2 folks now who have said the little states may make a difference. We've got a lot to look for tonight. Well, just ahead, the balance of power on Capitol Hill. Wolf Blitzer with the key races in the fight for control of the House and the Senate.
standouts in their respect.
This is a national sales alert from Dodge. Effective immediately for 5 full years. Get 0 APR on 2000 Dodge Stratus and Intrepid, 0.9 APR on 2000 Dodge Dakota and Durango, and 4.9 APR on select all-new 2001 Dodge Caravans. See your Dodge dealer immediately, as 60-month financing can save you over $5,600.
See the friendly Dodge dealer near you.
Open up our doors, peek around the corners at all the great stores, the ones you look for, names you know, a few to discover. You want selection? We got that covered. Grab a friend, bring the family, bring yourself and see all that shopping can be. Shopping with Simon, Simon is waiting for you.
Mall, centers, and shopping from Simon. Simply the best shopping there is.
I will no longer be a silent witness to my own kids' education.
I will no longer sit and watch the system fail my kids.
I will no longer let them use my tax dollars.
My tax dollars to tell me where to send my kids to school.
I will no longer let them put the system's
needs above my kids' needs.
I will no longer let freedom and choice be the American way in everything
except their education.
I want to have choices.
I want to have a voice.
I want to decide where to send my kids to school.
Total. Now with 100% calcium. Total is the only food that has 100% of the daily value of calcium in a single serving. Even before you add the milk. Total. Now with 100% calcium.
Recently, I learned that XO Communications is offering a 3-month guarantee, complete satisfaction, or you're switched back to your former provider for free. Well, we've decided to do the same. If you're not happy with Megatelco, call 1-866-MEGA-TELCO. It's just another way in which we're working hard to improve.
They can't. We do. Voice, data, and web for business. XO, not just talk.
We said later this hour we'd be talking to Kwesi Mfume, the president and CEO of the NAACP. The time has come. He joins us now from Baltimore. What can you tell us about your Get Out the Vote effort at this hour?
Well, Bernie, it's a huge success by every indication that we have, and we've looked at precincts and polling places in every region across America. And throughout the larger black community, it seems that it has worked, and it's working in a way that may even exceed our wildest expectations. We have put 18 months of hard work into a large educative process. We spent months registering people. Now we're in the days of this GOTV campaign, and have spent almost $12 million in the process. It's a very, very serious election for African Americans and for all Americans, quite frankly, for many reasons, not the least of which is the fate of the Supreme Court as a result of the next president.
Are you by chance getting hourly reports from around the country?
We are.
What are they telling you about percentages of turnout?
Well, percentages are running as high as 80% in some areas to about 65% in other areas. But one thing seems to be clear and holding throughout this pattern is that in every instance, it's a significantly higher turnout than was the case 4 years ago in the previous election.
And what does that tell you?
It tells me that people are energized, that they believe that their vote will make a difference, which is very, very good. And they're prepared to stand up and not necessarily be talked about by pundits and pollsters about what they will do or what they won't do. People seem to be coming out to say, look, this is about me. It's about my future. It's about what I believe in, and so I'm going to participate. And that the interesting thing about that is, as stewards of this democracy, we all have that responsibility. So when we see turnout like this, it's heartening and it's encouraging. And we believe also, quite frankly, that at the end of the day, it will make a significant impact on the outcome.
Why did some people have the impression that the Republicans had a more energized base turning out than the Democrats in the closing weeks of this campaign?
I don't know. I think people were talking a good game. Our work at the NAACP was to wait for Election Day and to use all of our energy there to make sure that we did the kind of GOTV campaign that we needed. There is energy among Republicans. We don't doubt that. I think many sense that this is a chance for them to win back the White House and to hold the Congress. But we believe, quite frankly, that with large numbers of people turning out in black communities and Latino communities in particular, in union households and other places throughout the community and throughout the nation, that overtakes that enthusiasm with an enthusiasm that has its own distinction. The other thing is that most of the polls have been measuring likely voters. Our effort for 18 months was to go after the unlikely voter, and we believe it is that unlikely voter that will make the difference today.
Kwesi Mfume, president of the NAACP, thanks for joining us. We'll see you later on.
Thank you.
Judy?
And beyond the presidential race, the key question in this election is which party will control the House and the Senate. Wolf Blitzer will be keeping tabs on the balance of power throughout this night. And let's go to you now, Wolf.
Thank you, Judy. Not only is there an extremely close race for the presidency, this is also the first time since 1948 when control of the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives all have been legitimately up for grabs on Election Day. Republicans currently control both the House and the Senate, but by relatively slim margins, which could become even slimmer by the time all the votes are counted. And there are 34 Senate races on the ballot this year. Republicans are defending 19 seats, the Democrats 15, with several just too close to call. Let's take a look at two of the races which could tip the balance of power in the Senate. In Virginia, Democratic Senator Chuck Robb is fighting hard for a third term against the former popular Republican governor, George Allen. And in Michigan, Spencer Abraham, the Republican incumbent, is seeking a second term in a very tight race with the Democratic challenger, Debbie Stabenow. Joining us now to talk about this, Stuart Rothenberg. You'll be with us throughout the entire evening. This Senate contest is critical right now.
Well, Wolf, it's all about pickups, about gains and losses. And in Virginia, as you mentioned, Chuck Robb, Democratic senator, has had a very difficult race against Republican George Allen. He's somewhat of an underdog. The Democrats really need to hold this if they're going to take over the Senate. And in Michigan, Spence Abraham has had a lead. At least he did a few weeks ago. But Democratic challenger Debbie Stabenow is coming on strong. This race is a toss-up.
All right. As happens, of course, every 2 years, there are 435 seats up for grabs in the House of Representatives. Republicans currently hold a 13-seat majority, but with some 36 races too close to call, this could be a long night. Stu, let's take a look at two of the races that potentially could have an impact. In South Florida, for example, longtime incumbent Clay Shaw, Republican, is being challenged by Democrat Elaine Bloom. And in Connecticut, Republican Robert Simmons is challenging the Democrat Sam Gadenson. He's been in Congress for almost 20 years.
Well, Shaw is one of a number of Republican incumbents who are facing difficult races. In order to maintain control of the House, the Republicans need to hold on to Clay Shaw's district and a number of other GOP incumbents. And in Connecticut, you mentioned Sam Gadenson. This race was not on the radar screen a couple of months ago, but local issues and an attractive Republican challenger, Robert Simmons, a state legislator, could prove Sam Gadenson's downfall.
All right, Stu, thanks. Back to you, Bernie.
We'll be back to you many, many more times and oftener. Just 1/2 hour until the first poll closings in Indiana and Kentucky. Ahead, we're going to offer some tips on what to look for hour by hour this evening. Plus, the 7 keys to Election 2000. We're also tracking state ballot measures. Please log on to CNN.com for results throughout the night.
Log on to CNN.com for all the Election Day information you need, from the latest polls, projections, and results on demand. It's all at CNN.com.
Yes, there are numerous reports of fang fever springing up throughout the city.
Doctor, is there a treatment?
There is a treatment. Excuse me.
Thursday, November 16th, it's the Predators and Columbus Blue Jackets. Every fan there gets a team poster from the Tennessee Sports Fan.
Take 2 of these and call me in the morning.
Fang fever, catch it.
For over 100 Thanksgivings, Kroger has set the table for more family gatherings than any other grocery store in America. And to say thanks this holiday season, you'll find hundreds of Kroger Plus Card specials like these. Riverside turkeys are buy one, get one free. Half gallons of Kroger orange juice are 99 cents, and boneless half pork loin is just $1.99 a pound. Thanksgiving at Kroger. One more reason to go Krogering.
A special midnight edition of Larry King Live tonight on CNN.
Just 25 minutes until the first polls close in the states of Kentucky and Indiana. We're all sitting here eagerly awaiting those first real results, states that we can call. Bill Schneider, we just heard Kwesi Mfume, the head of the NAACP, say, you all have been talking about likely voters all along. We've been targeting the unlikely voters. Who are these people, and why haven't we been talking about them?
Who are these? Well, if they're unlikely to vote, we usually say we're not going to be real interested in what they have to say because they're unlikely to vote. But that's what both sides are doing. The gun owners and the National Rifle Association, the Christian Coalition, the NAACP, the unions, they're looking for people who you really can't rely on to vote. If this election is flooded with unlikely voters, people who rarely vote, then all bets are off, and all those polls could be very misleading, and pollsters are going to have a lot of explaining to do. Okay, welcome to CNN Election Night 2000. I will be your guide. Now, here are the stories we will be reporting hour by hour as the night goes on. 6 p.m. Eastern. The first polls close in Indiana and Kentucky. 20 electoral votes at stake. Keep an eye on Kentucky. It's voted for the winner in every election since 1964. In the 7 p.m. Eastern hour, polls close in 9 more states: Florida, Georgia, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Vermont, Virginia, North Carolina, Ohio, and West Virginia. Total, 106 electoral votes. The big prize, Florida, with 25 electoral votes. Florida also has an important Senate race where the GOP candidate, Representative Bill McCollum, was one of the House impeachment managers. We'll see if there's any lingering residue of the impeachment controversy. Another big Senate race is in Virginia, where Charles Robb is the most vulnerable Democrat running for re-election this year. Ohio is crucial for Bush. No Republican has ever been elected president without carrying Ohio, a state that went for Clinton twice. The 8 o'clock hour could be the deciding point in the election. Polls close in 17 states and the District of Columbia. 208 electoral votes. 3 crucial battleground states. Michigan, will unions deliver for Gore? Pennsylvania, will the state's conservative leanings on abortion and gun rights hurt Gore? Missouri, will this bellwether state vote for the winner in 2000? Missouri's bizarre Senate race pits Republican Senator John Ashcroft against the recently deceased Democratic governor, Mel Carnahan. If Carnahan wins, his widow will take the seat. Can a dead Democrat defeat Senator Ashcroft? Texas and Tennessee also close at 8. Texas looks like a big win for Bush, but Tennessee is no sure thing for Gore. Gore could become the first candidate who fails to carry his home state since George McGovern in 1972. 9 p.m. Eastern, 12 more states come in, another 102 electoral votes, including the battleground states of Minnesota and Wisconsin. Will Ralph Nader take enough votes from Gore to put those 2 historically liberal states in the GOP column? But the headline in the 9 o'clock Eastern hour will be New York. Senate, not president. Will Hillary Rodham Clinton become the first lady who overreached or the first lady who made it on her own? At 10 p.m. Eastern, 23 more electoral votes come in from Iowa, that's a battleground state, and a number of western states. At 11 p.m. Eastern, the big enchilada comes in, California, with 54 electoral votes. California is expected to go for Gore, but Bush hopes to put Ronald Reagan's state back in the GOP column, where it was for almost 50 years before it became Clinton country. Also, Oregon and Washington, two more West Coast battleground states where Nader voters will play a key role. One more big Senate race in Washington State, where incumbent Republican Slade Gorton is facing a self-financed multi-millionaire challenger who happens to be a woman, Internet executive Maria Cantwell. We'll be looking to see if the gender gap plays a decisive role in that race, and all over the country. If men are from Mars and women are from Venus, then Election 2000 could end up being the latest installment of Star Wars. Now, by 12 midnight Eastern Time, only Alaska is left with 3 electoral votes. You know, it's kind of chilly up there in November, but not to worry, because if this race is as close as it looks right now, at the midnight hour, we may still be counting ballots in Florida.
Gee.
But we're always happy to think about Alaska while we're doing it. All right, Jeff Greenfield, we've heard Bill Schneider's election guide, if you will, and you've been thinking about what the keys are to this election.
Yeah, we're going to try to answer some questions tonight, not just about where the votes came from, but maybe why. We call them the 7 keys to the presidency, and we will be revisiting them throughout the night. First, big government. As you heard Pat Robertson say, the Republicans are trying to make an issue that Al Gore is the big government man. Al Gore is trying to argue that George Bush would undermine popular government programs like Social Security and Medicare. We're going to try to figure out where the voters were on that. 2, the gender gap. Now, men always vote more Republican than women. The question is, which candidate keeps the gender gap narrow on his side and widens it on the other? If women vote for Bush more than they normally do in in Republican areas, Bush has a very good night ahead of him. 3, the social issues. The Gore campaign had argued months ago that the environment and gun control and abortion would play for them. It may be that in states like Pennsylvania and Michigan and West Virginia, issues like guns and the environment will work against Al Gore. We're going to find out. 4, was it the economy, stupid? You already heard Bill Schneider explain that the public seems to like the economy, but may also be worried about non-economic issues. Which of these 2 strains dominated, if either? That's one other question we're going to try to be answered, and in some case on a state-by-state basis if we can. 5, the Clinton factor. Once again, Mr. Schneider has cued us on this. Clinton, high job approval ratings, low personal approval ratings. Were the voters looking for a change, or were they looking to keep the Clinton administration philosophy going? 6, the Nader factor. In Wisconsin, in Minnesota, perhaps in Washington or Oregon, could it be that this third-party candidate will take enough votes to defeat Al Gore, and will he get the 5% needed to become a federally funded party 4 years hence? And finally, what kind of leader is the country looking for? If it's experience, that speaks well to Al Gore. If it's leadership, if it's amiability, if it's personality, that speaks well to George W. Bush. And as I say, throughout this evening, we're going to be revisiting these questions as the exit polls and the votes come in. And Bernie, we think if we get the answers to these questions, we might know who the president is. But I'll tell you something, if it's as close as it looks now, we could still answer these questions and say, your guess is as good as ours.
Indeed, very much so. Well, we're going to stand down for just a moment, a brief moment, and when we come back, we're going to hear from the former White House press secretary for President Clinton, Joe Lockhart, and Scott Reed, the man who managed Bob Dole's campaign in '96. More from CNN and Atlanta in a moment.
Coverage of Election 2000 is brought to you by America's pharmaceutical companies and Ditech.com. For expanded coverage, log on to CNN.com. America's pharmaceutical companies and Ditech.com. Home loan savings direct from the lender.
Does everybody know what this is? A heart. 50 million Americans suffer from high blood pressure. There are no symptoms, yet high blood pressure is the primary cause of heart disease. There are still millions who are unable to lower their blood pressure with medication. That's why we're developing this new medicine, and it has excellent effectiveness in treating blood pressure. Maybe by the time these kids are my age, we'll have found a way to prevent high blood pressure in everyone.
Got yourself into too much credit card debt? Why not point and click your way out of debt with a second mortgage from Ditech.com? Whether you have equity or no equity, good credit or not so good credit, Ditech has a second mortgage with absolutely no closing costs to help you lower your monthly payments now. So point and click your way out of high-interest, non-tax deductible credit card debt at Ditech.com or call us at 1-800-71-FIX.
Hi, My car's out front.
We'll get started right away.
Five Star, an easier way to sell and service cars and trucks.
You're all set.
Great job, guys. Let's run that drill again.
5 Star, certified training so rigorous, only the best make the cut. It's better. We'll prove it only where you see these signs.
The internet goes everywhere because of us.
The internet is more reliable because of us.
The internet is growing because of us.
The internet is more exciting because of us. The internet is faster because of us.
The internet is better because of us.
Delivering the most content from the world's biggest network, Akamai.
Let's see, college in 4 years, costs up 40% over the next 5. Somebody do the math here.
It'd be great if our money would grow as fast as these kids. I can't believe.
Will paying for college be as painful as this?
Hey, that kid just dropped a pretzel? Because I like pretzels. I really like
We'll be able to help with their education.
I wonder if we should have put that money in a trust. Maybe we would have.
I hope she was kidding about college in Hawaii.
Thank you, Painweber.
Now let's hear from two men who know what it's like to be campaign insiders on Election Day. We're joined by Joe Lockhart, former White House press secretary for President Clinton, and Scott Reed, Bob Dole's campaign manager in the 1996 election. Gentlemen, you both are very well plugged in. I know you're both talking to people in Scott's case in the Bush campaign, and certainly in Joe's case in the Gore campaign. What are you hearing, and what's going on, for example, with deploying Jesse Jackson to Pennsylvania at this late hour? Joe?
Well, I think it's a reflection of just how little people know at this point about how this is all going to turn out and just how tight it is. And I think on Election Day, people who are generally type A personalities running around have nothing to do. So if you can find something to do, if you can deploy people out to states, if you can call into radio stations, if nothing else, it keeps you busy and it makes you feel like you're doing something.
So what are we doing? Just spinning our wheels? Is that what's going on, Scott?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, Republicans are very upbeat and optimistic about this election. They feel Bush has run a very smart campaign. He's finishing strong. He had a good, strong finish into Texas last night, going both to Arkansas and Tennessee. And Republicans believe that he's asked for a mandate to lead with some very specific issues, and we're very excited about tonight. Also in the Congress, a lot of excitement there.
Joe, we hear Scott saying that Governor Bush has run a very smart campaign, but there are some Democrats who question whether going to Arkansas, going to Tennessee, may be overreaching on his part. How do you read this?
I actually think he overall has run a smart campaign, but I think he finished rather badly. He was pushed off course a little bit by the drunk driving revelation. And then I think over the weekend he got more partisan and personal, and he sort of walked away from the issues that he had run on, which was he was different. I think going to Arkansas and Tennessee looked a little cocky, looked a little sort of the in-your-face politics that people have turned off to, and that he made a case against. So I think Al Gore has finished very strongly, has charged up the base, and I think Governor Bush, after running a smart campaign, finished kind of slowly.
Scott, I'm assuming you don't see it that way these last few days.
No, I don't quite see it that way. Again, Bush has talked about issues throughout this whole campaign. He had huge crowds in Tennessee and Arkansas. I don't know if Tennessee's Gore's home state or if Washington, D.C. is his home state, but either way, finishing in those states, it looks like we're going to win these culturally conservative states that are going to move towards Bush, I believe, because of Bill Clinton. That's the thing to watch tonight. Watch a lot of these states like West Virginia, Iowa. These are states where I think there's going to be a Clinton factor that's going to be a little bit of a shadow and a hangover for Al Gore.
Joe, what about the Clinton factor? How much is that going to hurt Al Gore tonight?
Oh, you know, I think that the Republicans love to talk about Bill Clinton because they can't talk about the economy. They can't talk about how great the last 8 years have been. This isn't about Bill Clinton. It's about Al Gore and George Bush, and that's what the country's making a decision on. And I think Al Gore over the last week has come under some criticism, but he's played it about right, which is Bill Clinton went
and tried to energize particular parts of the base. But in the battleground states, Al Gore went out and said, this is about me and George Bush. Make a decision. I think he's going to do quite well tonight.
Folks, it's Jeff Greenfield. Just for a minute, put aside the partisan hats. Joe, Scott, Joe first. If Gore loses, what will the Democrats blame him most for? Same question to you, Scott, if Bush loses. Be a Monday morning quarterback.
I think if Gore loses, the Democrats will look at not taking as much advantage of the prosperous times we're living in, and that will somehow get tied up in how the president was used and wasn't used. I think you can make a case for earlier in the year them not getting it exactly right, but I think in the last week, Gore was right to make this about Al Gore, not the president.
Okay, Scott, that was an honest answer from Joe. How about yourself? If Bush loses, who gets blamed?
I think if Bush loses, there'll be some questions about their electoral strategy, that it may have been spread a little too thin. They were dealt a hand of cards that had a lot of opportunities in a lot of non-traditional Republican states. They've very aggressively gone after them, including the whole West Coast. But at the end of the day, they may have stretched themselves a little too thin. I don't believe they did, but that's one piece of possible criticism.
Okay.
All right, Scott Reed, Joe Lockhart, thank you both, and we hope to see you soon. Bernie.
As we await the first poll closings, we'll check in with David Peeler for a look at the strategy and final counts in the ad wars. Plus, to join the real-time Spin chat room, please log on to CNN.com.
I'm a pharmaceutical company researcher. My area specialty is women's health. We're looking at all ages of a woman's life, developing better medicines for the diseases we've already started on: osteoporosis, Alzheimer's disease, and breast cancer. I really love what I do. My hope for the future is that we develop new medicines for women that let them enjoy healthier, active lives.
What we're doing here is taking surplus aircraft left over from the Cold War, and we're using them to fight the war on drugs.
We take these aircraft out of the desert and we literally strip them down to the floorboards.
We'll totally replace this entire flight deck.
And we're bringing them up to today's state of the art.
What we put in here is 3 brand new radar stations.
And with that radar, there is nowhere to run, nowhere to hide.
The Customs Service gets new airplanes, the taxpayers get a break, everybody wins. Everybody but the bad guys.
I see her the same time almost every day. She's always there waiting for me. I bring her lunch up to our apartment and I sing Italian love songs to her.
Philip Morris provides grants to Meals on Wheels programs so that thousands of seniors can have a hot meal and a visitor. Philip Morris and Meals on Wheels are fighting more than just hunger among the elderly. We're fighting loneliness. Working to make a difference, the people of Philip Morris.
Open up our doors, peek around the corners at all the great stores. The ones you look for, names you know, a few to discover. You want selection? We got that covered. Grab a friend, bring the family, bring yourself and see all that shopping can be. Shopping with Simon, Simon is waiting for you.
Malls, centers, and shopping from Simon. It's simply the best shopping there is.
Hello, I'm Charles Gaines. When I found out that XO Communications had customer service agents available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, well, naturally, I felt we should too.
Thank you for calling Mega Telco. This is Balcazar, Prince of Misery and Apprentice to Evil. May I help you?
It's all about serving you better.
They can't. We do. Voice, data, and web for business. XO, not just talk.
Coming up at the top of the hour. At 6 p.m. Eastern Time, the Election 2000 count begins as the first polls in the country close in Indiana and Kentucky. Holding 20 electoral votes between them, Indiana has voted Democratic only once in the past 60 years, when it supported Lyndon Johnson in 1964. And Kentucky may be considered a bellwether state. It has voted for presidential winners for the past 36 years. Will the state that hosts the Run for the Roses continue its winning streak in such a close run for the White House? The night is early. Stay tuned.
Nice stuff.
Joining us now, a familiar personage on Inside Politics, David Peeler of Competitive Media Reporting. He tracks ad spending in the top 75 markets. David, what was different about the ad spending in this election?
Well, Bernie, I think there's a couple of things that are of note. You know, we've talked about both Bush and the RNC combining to spend $85 million versus Gore and the DNC $64 million and Ralph Nader $1 million. But I think here the story is really a couple of things. One, you know, this is the first race that we've seen where the candidates went on air as early as they did. Both parties did, both candidates did. I think the second thing that stands out is that there used to be a line between what was party-funded advertising and what was individual candidate advertising. That line's been all but erased now. I mean, you really can't tell the difference between the two at this point in the race. And I think media is always about tactics. You know, it's always been about the swing states. That's where the media dollars go. What we've seen this year is some surprising things. We've seen, for example, the Bush campaign spend $11 million uncontested in the state of California. Al Gore and the DNC didn't spend a dime in California, and the Bush campaign spent quite a bit. I think as we've gotten down to the last couple of weeks here, we've seen two different tactics emerge. We've seen Bush try and stay on 3 or 4 messages and try and get that out in a national campaign. I think we've seen Al Gore and the DNC take their themes but try and do a state-by-state individual media tactic. So that's what's different from a presidential front. Moving on to the Senate races, I think we're seeing the effect of the wealth effect come into play here. The new thing now is the self-financed candidate. We saw John Corzine, who we spoke about yesterday, spend $31 million in the general election on top of $30 million in the primary. Maria Cantwell spent $5.5 million in the state of Washington. Mark Dayton of the Dayton-Hudson family, $4.5 million, and much of that of their own money. So it's clearly the Senate races continue to get more and more expensive to run, and you're seeing more and more self-financed candidates. Moving on to the House races, what's of interest here is last cycle we joked about independent groups, and we talked about the parties ultimately spending more than the candidates. Well, this cycle it's happened. For example, in California, in the 36th, we see Representative Kuykendall spending $760,000, but the party adding in $1.3 million against Jane Hartman's $900,000 and the Democratic Party $820,000. So clearly, we've seen a shift. It's an awful lot of money being spent by individual groups as well as the parties.
Okay, thank you, David Peeler.
Thank you.
Judy.
And we are literally 3 minutes away from the polls closing in the first 2 states tonight, Indiana and Kentucky. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to try to call those elections.
Tonight on Larry King Live Election Day 2000, join me, a special midnight show with Ann Richards, Howard Baker, and others. Tonight on CNN.
For over 100 Thanksgivings, Kroger has set the table for more family gatherings than any other grocery store in America. And to say thanks this holiday season, you'll find hundreds of Kroger Plus Card specials like these. Riverside turkeys are buy one, get one free. Half gallons of Kroger orange juice are 99 cents, and boneless half pork loin is just $1.99 a pound. Thanksgiving at Kroger. One more reason to go Krogering.
Are you ready? McClure's.
What do you get when you add 1.9% APR with 49 miles per gallon and a 100,000-mile powertrain warranty, and then 24,000 miles of paid service? Volkswagen. And then when you add more Volkswagen sold than all the other dealers put together and 6-day service open till 8:30 at night, you get Hallmark Volkswagen. But remember, this interest rate may not last forever, so you better hurry. And if you're a surfer, check us out on the web at hallmarkauto.com.
We are a startup company based here in Tennessee, and we sell
ideas. I've been here 37 years myself. I came with the building.
27 employees.
780 people here. Narrow margins means you got to crank out a lot of product.
People that we're trying to attract are very perk savvy.
You know, keeping workers today is a matter of providing security to their family.
One of our most effective recruiting tools is Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. More hospitals, more doctors.
We say Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee makes them feel good.
From 2 employees to 2,000, we're Blue Cross Blue Shield of Business in Tennessee.
Who brought down the most infamous drug lord, Killing Pablo, Sunday, 10 Eastern.
From CNN Center in Atlanta, coverage of Election 2000 continues. Here again, Judy Woodruff, Bernard Shaw, Jeff Greenfield, and Bill Schneider.
It is 6 o'clock on the East Coast. The polls have closed in 2 states, Indiana and Kentucky, and CNN is able to make its first call of the night. In Indiana, George W. Bush, the winner in a state that has only voted Democratic for president once in 60 years. In the state of Kentucky, something of a bellwether state, voted for the winning presidential candidate every year since 1964. Another win for George W. Bush. Looking at the electoral map, it is still very early, but putting these 2 states together, 20 electoral votes tallied up under the name of Texas Governor George W. Bush. Jeff Greenfield, our first calls of the night, and so far, pretty much what we expected.
Yes, I think it may be worth pointing out that Clinton did carry Kentucky twice. Clinton and Gore both hail from border states, and you might have thought that would have given Gore a leg up in Kentucky. This may be one of those states where the environment, where cultural conservatism cut against Al Gore as it did not against Bill Clinton.
Bill Schneider, the man with all the polls. What are voters saying as they leave?
Well, we asked the voters of Kentucky, which Clinton carried twice, what was the one quality that mattered most to you when you decided how to vote for president? And that quality was honest and trustworthy. And the voters in Kentucky who cited that quality went overwhelmingly for George W. Bush, 82% to just 16% for Al Gore. Now, another quality we asked people about was understands complex issues. People who said they wanted a candidate who understands complex issues went overwhelmingly for Al Gore. But what's interesting is 3 times as many voters said they were interested in someone who is honest and trustworthy than said they were interested in someone who understands complex issues. And that's the key to Kentucky going for George W. Bush.
And thinking overall about what's happening across this great country of ours, this thing presidentially, in terms of the race for the White House, is just like this.
That's right, absolutely, because people see qualities in Bush that they like and some that they have doubts about, and they see the same thing about Al Gore. They wonder about his credibility, but they think he has the knowledge and experience. So they are of 2 minds about the candidates.
And Bill, you have already, just early, given us answer to one of these keys to the presidency. We're asking, what kind of leader do Americans want? And at least in the state of Kentucky, there is no question that they want somebody whose character matters more to them than the experience. And this is the kind of thing I think will be very helpful throughout the night.
I think it's also fair to say that in Kentucky, the voters are saying they don't want a president with the views on tobacco that Al Gore has. This is a state that relies heavily for its economy on tobacco as a crop. We know that Al Gore has, throughout his career, at least after a certain point, made a big issue out of needing government regulation. In the last year or so, he was for the government stepping in and regulating cigarettes, nicotine in cigarettes.
Though he once talked about himself as having been a tobacco farmer at one point.
And during the vice presidential debate there in Danville, Kentucky, the tobacco farmers in that area near horse country indicated that generally they favored the governor from Texas.
Right. And yet Clinton, who was anti-tobacco, carried the state in '96. Gore couldn't do it. It's another one of those cases where they may be holding Gore to a different standard than they held Clinton.
Yep, that's what Clinton carried it by the narrowest margin of any state he carried in 1996. So if George Bush was going to win, he had to take Kentucky. If he has any chance of winning, well, he took it.
We were also told that his environmental positions hurt him in Kentucky. This is a state where there are a number of auto-producing plants, some of them owned by companies outside the country. In his book, Earth in the Balance, he writes about the end of the internal combustion engine. That's a very important component of the automobile, and that's something that didn't go over well in that state as well.
Pardon me, Judy. Wolf Blitzer standing by, as he will be throughout the night, to bring us up to date on the balance of power. Wolf also has a governor's race to call. Wolf.
Well, let's take a look at the Senate first. No great surprise. Richard Lugar, the Republican incumbent in Indiana, he easily defeats his Democratic challenger, David Johnson, an attorney, former legislative counsel to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Lugar once again wins. Let's take a look at the balance of power in the Senate. No change right now. The Republicans still hold 54 seats, the Democrats 46 seats. There are 33 undecided now, of course, that Lugar has won his seat. Stuart Rothenberg, the Democrats need 5 seats, 5 wins to have a majority. Why 5 if it's 54 to 46?
Well, normally, Wolf, you'd say the Democrats just need to get to 50, and then assuming they elect a president and a vice president, the vice president would break the tie for them. But in this case, the vice president, if he's a Democrat, would be Joe Lieberman, who's also running for re-election from the Senate from Connecticut. So if Lieberman is elected vice president, he'd have to give up his Senate seat in Connecticut. The governor of Connecticut is John Rowland, a Republican who has promised to appoint a Republican to fill that vacancy. So the Democrats can't win the Senate by getting to 50. They need 51.
In the House, we're closely following 2 congressional races, one in Indiana, the incumbent, the Republican John Hostetler, facing a challenge from the Democrat Paul Perry, and in Kentucky, Representative Ann Northup challenged by Eleanor Jordan. 2 races. Let's take a look at the balance of power in the House of Representatives. Right now, there are, of course, still 223 Republicans, 210 Democrats, 2 independents. The Democrats need to win 7 seats, toss-up seats, in order to have a majority. But they really, Stuart, need more than 7. They need 8 or 9, don't they?
That's right, Wolf, because it's one thing to say, what do they need to get to 218? It's another thing to say, what do they get to elect their own speaker? In this case, it would probably be Dick Gephardt. A number of Democrats, at least one, Jim Traficant of Ohio, but others are mentioned as possible defectors, people who might vote for a Republican for speaker. So the Democrats need something of a cushion if they're going to be sure to be able to organize the House.
All right, and we're also ready at this point to declare a winner in the gubernatorial race in Indiana. Frank O'Bannon, the winner, the Democrat, defeating David McIntosh, the former Republican congressman. If the Republicans, Stuart, are so easily the winner in the gubernatorial race in Indiana, yet Bush is the easy Republican winner. It seems people in Indiana can split their vote.
Absolutely, and it's the difference between federal races and state races. I think in many conservative, generally Republican states, voters are willing to send a Democrat to the state house, feeling that the Democrat is generally moderate to conservative, reflects those values. I think they're more cautious about sending them to Washington, D.C., where they get those other Democrats there, and their views might change.
And I think we're going to see a pattern of that throughout the night. That's it for now from the Balance of Power desk. Back to the National Desk.
You know, it's interesting to me that Richard Lugar's election, he, like Orrin Hatch, reminds us of something. In Washington, a powerful, respected man. Lugar tried to run for the presidency 4 years ago. He was less than an asterisk, just as Orrin Hatch was this year. There's something about long-term senators, I guess, that doesn't play on the presidential stage.
But I'm always fascinated. We talked about this the other day, Bill Schneider and Bernie. In a state like Indiana, you think of it as so Republican, and yet they've just re-elected a Democratic governor there.
Well, times are good, and when times are good, incumbents do very well, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. And so I think we're seeing some of that beginning to show up here. The interesting point is Gore ought to be doing a lot better if times are good. It shouldn't be a close race, as it looks like it will be.
Across the country.
Across the country, yes.
Yeah. All right, we are going to take a short break ourselves, and when we come back, we're going to preview that big Senate race in the state of New York. There's 3 hours to go before the polls close, but we've got a lot to talk about there. It's Rick Lazio versus the First Lady. We'll be right back.
Coverage of Election 2000 is brought to you by Akamai and America's pharmaceutical companies. For expanded coverage, log on to CNN.com. Akamai, bringing you a better internet, and America's pharmaceutical companies.
The internet is faster because of us.
The internet is more reliable because of us.
The internet is growing because of us.
The internet is more exciting because of us.
The internet goes everywhere because of us. The internet is better because of us.
Delivering the most content from the world's biggest network, Akamai.
Does everybody know what this is? A heart. 50
50 million Americans suffer from high blood pressure. There are no symptoms, yet high blood pressure is the primary cause of heart disease. There are still millions who are unable to lower their blood pressure with medication. That's why we're developing this new medicine, and it has excellent effectiveness in treating blood pressure. Maybe by the time these kids are my age, we'll have found a way to prevent high blood pressure in everyone.
Got yourself into too much credit card debt? Why not point and click your way out of debt with a second mortgage from Ditech.com? Whether you have equity or no equity, good credit or not so good credit, Ditech has a second mortgage with absolutely no closing costs to help you lower your monthly payments now. So point and click your way out of high-interest, non-tax deductible credit card debt at Ditech.com or call us at 1-800-71-FIX.
How many experts does it take to predict a market change?
Tickets, folks. I'm out. Tax laws have changed. Should I be looking at my estate plan again?
Anyone who knows me wouldn't recommend a stock like this.
Oh, not again. This guy.
Investment strategies for you. Great. Just for me and 5 million other people.
Thank you, PaineWebber.
The world, they take people where they need to go. But wherever the road ends, there's a good chance it started with Caterpillar equipment.
In election 2001, one U.S. Senate race has gotten the lion's share of publicity. It's the showdown in New York, featuring the unprecedented candidacy of First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton. Both she and her opponent, Rick Lazio, offered one more campaign pose for the cameras this election day. CNN's Frank Buckley has been covering the New York Senate race.
First Lady Hillary Clinton emerged from a voting booth ahead in most polls, but still locked in a tight race with Republican Congressman Rick Lazio, who voted with daughter Molly. Lazio asked later if he was discouraged by the polls.
Not the one that has me in the lead.
Go get him, Rick.
The Long Island congressman engaged in a full day of Election Day campaigning, beginning early on Long Island, later flying upstate with a final push planned in New York City. One voter Lazio wouldn't reach, his opponent's husband, the president.
You can't put me down as undecided.
In fact, there were few undecided voters left by Election Day, according to pollsters. This was a high-profile race that played out before New York voters over the course of a year and a half. Those voters who hadn't made up their minds by today, say analysts, were probably going to be no-shows at the polls.
Take a friend, take a couple of friends, talk to your friends about going to vote.
One reason why both candidates concentrated heavily on get-out-the-vote activities in the final days of this campaign, targeted at their supporters.
If you can pass the word to the whole family how much I'd appreciate having their vote.
For Lazio, the challenge to overcome a registered voter base in New York that favors Democrats 5-3, and a Democratic national ticket expected to win New York in double digits. Still, Lazio had one advantage on Mrs. Clinton, a cornerstone of his campaign. He is a native New Yorker.
I'm a lifelong New Yorker, and that's who I want representing me as a New Yorker, not an outsider.
Mrs. Clinton's aim to keep the race focused on issues and to bring out her base, especially African-American voters. Nearly 9 out of 10 who polls say support her.
I admire her philosophy. I have great respect for her. I admire her integrity.
Tonight, Mrs. Clinton's 16-month quest for a Senate seat is over. Now, in the hands of voters. Frank Buckley, CNN, New York.
We're joined now by Frank Buckley, who is covering Hillary Clinton's campaign this evening, and Deborah Fayerick, reporting on Rick Lazio's campaign. The question about turnout. First to you, Deborah. What are you hearing from your side on turnout today?
Well, turnout here in New York City was very, very strong. At many polling places, actually, the lines were out the door and in some cases around the building. And New York City has been a very strong voter base for Hillary Clinton. Out in the suburbs, we were hearing similar reports as well. And that's a strong base for Lazio.
Frank?
Yeah, anecdotally so far, Bernie, the turnout seems to be strong, but it's so far just anecdotal. Hearing from both sides, that the Republicans are telling me that they're getting very strong turnout upstate, which would tend to favor them. The Democrats are telling me that they're getting a very strong turnout in the city, and that would tend to favor Mrs. Clinton. I can tell you that the get out the vote effort was intense on both sides. On the Democrat side, on Hillary Clinton's side, for example, they sent out 8 million pieces of literature, also made 8 million phone calls to voters here in New York during the past year. 3 million of the phone calls were automated calls. And to give you a sense of the kind of organization that's in place, the Democrats have 25,000 election day volunteers, they tell me. That compares to about 8,000 in 1996.
Deborah, in the Lazio camp, what are you hearing about their concerns right now as they await, obviously, the returns, but also reflect on the kind of campaign run, especially in the last 48 hours?
Well, what we can tell you is this. We spoke to a spokesperson earlier this afternoon. She said that he was feeling very enthusiastic, very energized. However, as he watches the election returns, the spokesperson also said this was going to be a very tense time. And one thing that we're beginning to hear is this whole issue of timing. Remember, Rick Lazio didn't get into this race until about 5.5 months ago when New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani decided he was not going to be running. And this morning, the governor's wife, Libby Pataki, on WROW radio in Albany, said that the mayor's timing, that he just hung around too long. And in her words, he was just jerking people around. And she called the mayor selfish because of that. Later in the day, we also began to hear that from Rick Lazio himself. And he said that if I had a magic wand, I would have gotten into this race earlier, but that was not the way it was. So we're beginning to hear this timing issue, the fact that he has only been in this race 5.5 months compared to some 16 months for the First Lady.
And Frank, before we leave you, a rather facetious question. Somewhat passing media interest in the Clinton campaign headquarters there?
Bernie, let me give you a sense of the kind of media interest. We have another camera on the other side that's looking back to the riser that I'm sitting on. We'll take that camera shot, and you can get a sense. This riser that is looking toward the podium, these are all the cameras and reporters that are looking in on this race tonight. I mean, this has not been the interest every day of this campaign during the past year and a half, but certainly there's a great deal of national interest and local interest, international interest as well on this race, and all of the cameras will be facing toward Hillary Clinton at some point tonight.
Frank Buckley, Deborah Favorite, thanks very much. Judy.
And now we want to bring in to the picture two people we're going to be going to throughout this evening, a CNN political analyst. First, former Clinton press secretary Mike McCurry and Mary Matalin, co-host of CNN's Crossfire. Both of you are in Washington. Before we move on to the presidential contest, let me just pick up with a quick question about this New York Senate race. Mary, to you first. Given the fact that the polls have been showing Mrs. Clinton ahead, is there anything Rick Lazio could have done differently? And today, of course, now we're hearing, as we just reported, this, I guess for lack of a better word, sniping about whether Rudy Giuliani got out soon enough.
Well, it's pretty hard to overcome a 2 million vote advantage, which is what is going on in New York. And of course, Al Gore is carrying it heavily. Surprisingly, Mrs. Clinton didn't do as well as she should have done, or Lazio did better than was expected. And probably if he had more time and wasn't having to spend as much time as he did fundraising, and it's not over yet, but, you know, it might have been a different race. But I don't think sniping at Giuliani is the right way to go.
Mike McCurry.
Well, I think Mrs. Clinton is going to be, if she's elected tonight, a great United States Senator from New York, a very worthy successor of my old boss, Pat Moynihan. She will also probably become a godsend to the National Republican Party because they're going to use her as sort of the replacement for Ted Kennedy and all the direct mail pieces that bash liberals from here going forward for at least the next 6 years. But I think in the end, the people in New York will be very satisfied with their choice.
Now, Mary, that wouldn't be the case, would it?
I don't, unless Ted Kennedy's planning on leaving. I think he'll still be the main source of our mail.
All right, let's talk about the presidential contest. Of course, we've been able to call Indiana and Kentucky the two states where the polls have closed. Mary, it's still very early. You are clearly, though, talking to the George W. Bush campaign. What are they saying right now about how they feel?
They're feeling cautiously optimistic. They have held, it looks from what's going on the ground, anecdotally, of course, they're holding on to the Republican base in the South and in the Mountain West, but they're adding, embarrassingly, for our friends on the other side, they're adding the so-called Dukakis states, Wisconsin and Iowa and West Virginia and Oregon. So there'll be a breadth of support in this victory for George W. Bush, which should help in the bringing the country together and reinforcing his theme of he is a president for all the people. They're feeling pretty good right now.
If that's the case, Mike McCurry, how can Al Gore pull this out, or can he?
Well, let's be clear. We don't know nothing yet. The polls are still open everywhere. The interesting thing is, up until 24 hours ago, we were being told that Florida, Michigan, Pennsylvania, they're the key to the election. No candidate can win those, and now it says, oops, maybe that was wrong. And in the Electoral College, we were hearing that maybe one candidate would win the popular vote but lose the Electoral College. Now we've got speculation going the other direction and flip-flopping on that. Look, nobody knows what the results are. What's going on right now is a massive ground war. Both of these campaigns turning out their vote. We're at that period of time where people are frantically calling their lists, making sure that they've got all their ID'd voters in the polls, frantically driving people to the polling places, things that our exit poll numbers that we speculate about haven't even picked up yet. But it's a massive ground war. I've heard from the Gore campaign they are very pleased with the reports they're getting, especially from African-American precincts.
And you know what, Judy? That is something that we do know. We do know the extraordinary amount of absentee ballots requested. In Florida, the Republicans feel as if they have 1 or 2 points a difference made up just in absentee ballot requests. So this is an unprecedented ground war, and it's the old-fashioned thing. It may have beat the paid media, which was a record-breaking expenditures this time.
Before I let you go, I'm going to put you both on the spot and ask you to make your long shot predictions for tonight. Mary, you go first.
Well, I don't know that this is a long shot, but it certainly is an embarrassment. It looks like the vice president may lose his home state and the president may lose his home state. That hasn't happened in over a quarter of a century, and it didn't start happening until the end. And whether or not it's a long shot, it certainly is an embarrassment.
Mike McCurry, your long shot prediction.
My long shot, and it's looking longer as the day goes on, but I still think Gore may carry Arizona, which was a rock-rib Republican state as long as I can remember. And my friend Joe Cimini is going to get elected to the California State Assembly, and because of term limits there, he's going to end up being the Speaker of the California State Assembly before you know it, and a figure in national politics. You heard it here first.
All right, we're writing all that down, and we'll call you back to get the spelling of his last name. Mike McCurry, Mary Madeline, and we'll be talking to you all a lot tonight. Thanks very much. Right.
Well, coming up, the battleground state of Florida and the last-minute push to get out the vote. Also, when we come back, we'll find out what's online with Leon Harris.
The all-new responsive Chrysler Sebring Performance Sedan. Proof that it's not the destination. It's the drive. Now, during the Chrysler Holiday Sale, lease the Sebring LX sedan for $259 a month.
My sister has one of the most devastating forms of arthritis. Dangerous side effects really prevented her from taking medications that would ease her pain. At my pharmaceutical company, we work to discover medicines that are as effective for that pain, but with fewer side effects. To know that we're helping millions of people every day, it's a high point of my career. To know that I've helped my sister is the high point of my life.
The internet goes everywhere because of us.
The internet is more reliable because of us.
The internet is growing because of us.
The internet is more exciting because of us. The internet is faster because of us.
The internet is better because of us.
Delivering the most content from the world's biggest network, Akamai.
It has arrived.
Listen to me. We have absolutely nothing to fear.
We're never going to survive this, none of us.
Something so powerful.
There's something wrong here.
Something so advanced that it knows no boundaries.
We've got to upgrade the server. It's our only chance.
Sun Microsystems presents The Dot. Your competition will never know it hit them. Someday that'll be me. It really will. That plan Dave laid out with Guardian is paying off. Of course, I'll still get up early every morning just so I can remember I don't have to make a meeting. Maybe I'll grow a beard, buy an old pickup truck, become an embarrassment to the kids. Might get Dave to ride in my truck, too.
There's a place we all want to be. Go there with Guardian.
You showed me the way.
Here now with a look at the election coverage online tonight. Leon Harris. Leon.
Hi, good evening, Bernie. Good evening, folks. Well, one reason why we're taking a look at internet activity on CNN.com this evening is because as of 4:30 p.m. today, we hit a record here. We outstripped all visits that we've ever had in one day to our website. And for the folks who came earlier, we're going to invite you to come back because we've since changed the website since then. We have beefed it up, we've re-engineered it, and we've added a host of features that we think are really going to enhance the coverage that we're offering you tonight on CNN television so that you can get a two-fisted sort of version of the coverage that we're offering you from CNN. Go to our website here, and you'll see the new front page here at CNN.com. And what you'll notice here in this first box that we have here on the upper right is a slot that gets you the most information you'll get anywhere, and much of this you can't get anywhere else. We give you snapshots of everything that's been called, and as you can see here, we show you here the map of the country, and you can see here in red 2 states there, Indiana and Kentucky. Red is the color that we have selected for George W. Bush tonight, and blue will be the colors that you see that pop up on all of our maps for Al Gore. And you can see here the first set of results we've got here, they're already in, but you can come down and scroll down this page, and you will see different ways of viewing all of this information. And the good news about all of this is that it's really easy to navigate because all the pages, all the fields of information are all linked. So no matter where you are, you can get there from here. Now, going back to the top, here's what we think is really novel. Look for this slot here, this line that says My Results. We'll show you something here. You can go to this page, and you can follow all of the results that are happening from your particular district, from your county even. What you do is, we'll go ahead and go and check a state that's already got some results posted. Check this out. We pick the states, and let's go down and take a look at Indiana, since we know we have results from Indiana. And we'll go to check a county here, and just for argument's sake, let's pick Boone County. Sounds good to me. And as you can see here, the information that comes up gives you a quick flash of what has actually happened already as the polls have closed. And it tells you how the information has been updated. Here, this has been updated as of 6:21 p.m. Now, here you can see George W. Bush has been awarded the state. You can also see here other races that are underway in that state. Here's a big picture here, the scoreboard for all the other candidates as well. But scroll down the page, and you'll find information, as we said, for the other states, the gubernatorial races, and also for the Senate races, if there are any in your state. Also, district race information, plenty of it. Now, also, we should advise you that if you go back to the main page, for those of you who like to have it both ways, you can also get this in Espanol. We've got a number of different languages providing the same sets of information. So make sure you check out the website. Plenty of features, and we'll have more later on. Back to you, Judy.
Fascinating, Leon, and we are going to be coming back to you throughout this night now that the website's up and running again. Up next, we're going to check in with our own Larry King and his panel of election guests. We'll be right back.
Closed captioning for this program has been provided by Verizon Communications.
Who brought down the most infamous lord of the drug trade? Killing Pablo on CNN Perspectives. Sunday, 10 Eastern, only on CNN.
Welcome to Shop at Home. Hi, I'm Kim Boyd. I want you to see, this ring you can see from way across the room. I was talking yesterday about men. I don't want the boys out there to get me wrong. I love boys. probably more than I should. I was my mama's nightmare growing up. I do. But I do know this, they are hard to train.
Shop at home, not your ordinary shopping channel.
A special midnight edition of Larry King Live tonight on CNN.
Got yourself into too much credit card debt? Why not point and click your way out of debt with a second mortgage from Ditech.com? Whether you have equity or no equity, good credit or not so good credit, Ditech has a second mortgage with absolutely no closing cost to help you lower your monthly payments now. So point and click your way out of high-interest, non-tax deductible credit card debt at Ditech.com or call us at 1-800-71-FIX.
I'm a pharmaceutical company researcher. My area specialty is women's health. We're looking at all ages of a woman's life, developing better medicines for the diseases we've already started on: osteoporosis, Alzheimer's disease, and breast cancer. I really love what I do. My hope for the future is that we develop new medicines for women that let them enjoy healthier, active lives.
And if you're just pulling up a chair to CNN's all-night coverage of this campaign 2000, Texas Governor George Bush is off to 20 electoral votes, having won Indiana and Kentucky, where the polls closed just 30 minutes ago. Judy?
And that is right. And the person who's going to be watching tonight along with us is our good friend down in Washington, or I should say up in Washington tonight, Larry King. Hello, Larry.
Thank you, Judith. Hello, Judy. I'm holding forth in the nation's capital where no elected official is. They're all out tonight. But we'll be coming in at various spots throughout the evening, probably once each hour, with guests like Rudy Giuliani and Senator Bob Dole and Ralph Nader. We'll have our panel of experts, where we'll start first by going down to Austin, Texas. Ari Fleischer, the Bush campaign senior advisor, is there. Ari, we know that they've given Indiana and Kentucky to you. Any surprises so far in any area?
No, it's hard. I'm hard-pressed to say that, Larry. I think that everything that we've been feeling and sensing for the last several weeks, last several days, apparently is going to be manifest tonight. We're feeling real good. A lot of close races out there, though, Larry. People still need to hit those polls and vote.
What about the turnout? Surprisingly high, low, what?
Very high, and I think that's a good sign. It's probably helping both candidates. It's a good sign for the country. It looks like a high turnout.
What, if any, was the factor, do you think, of Perot and Billy Graham coming forth? Billy didn't outright endorse, but just about this week. What were those factors?
Well, in a close race, every little bit counts. And Florida, indeed, has always been a battleground state, close race. And so each one of those little factors always goes into the final calculation. Who's to say what it is in the end that gets the job done? It often is a lot of little factors that add up.
What's the mood of the governor?
He's very upbeat, Larry. He approaches this with a sense of serenity as well. I think he's ready. We'll wait and see what the final results are. And again, it's close race in a lot of states, but he's feeling real good about things.
Since it is so close, what keeps you upbeat?
Well, Larry, there's been a year-and-a-half trend that's been in the making. It's been interrupted for about a 3-week period where the vice president was up in the polls, and he was not able to sustain that. The governor took the lead back during the course of the debates. And trends of that duration are very, very hard to break. And we see no signs out there that it's breaking. And so when you look at that, when you look at what we know of the results, of what we know about absentee ballot programs, of our strength in a lot of states, particularly in states that used to be strong Democrat states, it gives you a good feel going into the evening.
Any reversal happening? Is there any, and I know you contact people all day long, where you thought you had it and you're worried?
Well, you always worry, Larry. You never go into a race that's going to be a close race without really being ready with plans everywhere. and a contingency ready to increase your phone calls in different states, for example. And so we were ready. We've had a very big ground game that's been out there in all the states, unprecedented for a Republican campaign. It's bigger than anything the Democrats, interestingly, even have put together. And that's also very helpful here in the final day.
And a humongous amount of absentee ballots all over the country.
That's right.
Does that tell you long night, or might we go a few days from now?
Oh, I don't think anybody knows yet whether it's going to be a long night, a short night, how long a night. That's too soon to say. I think people are going to, when they hit the closing time, a lot of states will be too close to call. But within that, it still is all looking pretty good for us.
Ari, always nice seeing you. Have some coffee. Ari Fleischer in Austin, Texas. Now let's hop over to Nashville, Tennessee, where Doug Hattaway, a campaign spokesman for Al Gore, is standing by. I guess you just heard Ari. How do you feel?
Yes. I think if I have another cup of coffee, I'm going to go sky high here.
We feel good there?
About the... very good. We've been really happy with the heavy turnout we've seen. We've always said that turnout's going to be a good sign for Al Gore and Joe Lieberman. We've seen it particularly in Florida, particularly the crucial area of South Florida, and it looks like Florida is going very well. It's not over yet. We are still getting out the message to people who still need to vote, to come out and vote for Al Gore and Joe Lieberman. Every single vote is going to count in this race.
Did you expect to lose Indiana and Kentucky as is projected?
The recent polls had showed that trend, and that's fine. We're continuing to focus on states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, which, as you know, are some of the big prizes in the East. We're really reminding people across the country that important things are on the ballot tonight. Freedom of choice is on the ballot tonight. Prosperity itself is on the ballot tonight. We're continuing to get out that message and really pushing people who are inclined to vote Democratic, women, working people to get to the polls and cast those votes, because it ain't over yet.
All right, now, Doug, as you look at this, Ari said that he is optimistic even though it's close. Are you saying the same thing, optimistic and close?
Surprise, surprise. Yes, we are very optimistic. Again, we got optimistic early today by the unusually heavy turnout early in the day. The Democratic vote tends to come in later in the day. So it's a very good trend for us to hear about record turnouts in South Florida, record turnouts in a lot of Democratic areas, even Democratic areas in traditionally Republican states like New Hampshire and Nevada. We heard about what they call overperforming Democratic districts, where more Democrats were coming out today to vote than had come out in recent elections. So the pundits were saying voters weren't interested. I think we're seeing the voters had something else in mind entirely.
And what, Doug, is the mood of the vice president?
He's very upbeat as well. He campaigned 30 hours straight. He said he's going to work hard every day, not let us down. That's exactly what he did here. He's gathered with his family. They're finally able to relax a bit. They're starting to watch the returns. I think he's very optimistic about the outcome, given how hard we've worked to get out the vote, how hard he's worked to get out the message.
And are you prepared, Doug, for a long night as well?
We're prepared for anything, Larry. I think we are still working hard to get our people to the polls. That's going to go on until the very last minute in every single state and every single community available. This is where the polls are still open. This is a very close race. We all knew it was going to be close, and we think that everybody who can hear my voice, who's inclined to vote Democratic, ought to get up and go to the polls, because that's going to make all the difference.
Thank you, Doug Hattaway. That was Doug Hattaway from Nashville, Tennessee, spokesman for the Gore campaign. We'll be back in the next hour with more guests, and at 12 o'clock tonight, midnight Eastern time, we'll have a full panel discussion. Now let's go back down to Atlanta and our buddy Judy. Judith?
All right, Larry King, we wish you were here with us, but we're glad you're on our air, and you're right, we'll be coming back to you often throughout this night. Well, we are 23 minutes away from the polls closing in 6 states, including the crucial state of Florida. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the races in the state of Florida with Mark Potter. We're also going to bring in Hal Bruno for a look at the electoral map and all the states up for grabs. We'll be back.
Coverage of Election 2000 is brought to you by Chrysler and PaineWebber. For expanded coverage, log on to CNN.com. Chrysler, we're reinventing the passion for driving. And PaineWebber, thank you, PaineWebber.
Looking to save more and spend less this holiday season? With the Chrysler Holiday Sale, you can do just that. Because now you can save over $2,300 when you buy a new 2001 Town & Country LX with 4.9% financing. Or choose up to $3,000 cash allowance when you buy a new 2000 Chrysler minivan. So take advantage of the Chrysler Holiday Sale today for savings that let you spend more on a real holiday priority, yourself.
How many experts does it take to predict a market change?
Tickets, folks. I'm out.
Tax laws have changed. Should I be looking at my estate plan again?
Anyone who knows me wouldn't recommend a stock like this.
Oh, not again. This guy.
Investment strategies for you. Great. Just for me and 5 million other people.
Thank you, PaineWebber.
So, where are you hiding this new internet honcho of yours?
From Fred.
Yeah, and he's super busy. Okay, see in here? 1 moment. Okay.
Fred, got time to meet a business associate? No can do, Chief. I'm working on that new e-commerce package for you.
What's the best kept secret on the web? Interland, with everything from affordable site design and hosting to e-commerce, plus your own personal account manager.
Workaholic.
With his younger brother, the governor, Florida was supposed to be George W. Bush country, but it has turned out to be a real battleground. Mark Potter examines the tight race in Florida.
Thank you, Miami!
Underscoring Florida's political importance, Vice President Gore ended his campaign here with early morning stops in Miami Beach and Tampa.
We will keep the pressure on Fidel Castro until the people are free.
Over the weekend, Governor George W. Bush also rallied supporters in Miami and Central Florida. In the 11th hour, with 25 electoral votes at stake, the political parties called in all their stars.
Nibbling on sponge cake, watching the sun bake. All of these Democrats covered with oil. Fired up, ready to vote.
Get Out the Vote drives concentrated on African Americans.
Good afternoon, Mavis.
Seniors, and in Miami, the Cuban Americans.
Es de la campaña de George W. Bush.
Many analysts call the closeness of the Florida race the biggest surprise of election 2000. It was long believed that Governor Jeb Bush could easily carry Florida for his brother.
By the time the Republican Party woke up, or the Bush-Cheney campaign woke up to the fact that this was going to be a real dogfight, they had to play catch-up.
Vice President Gore made inroads by appealing to Florida's powerful senior voting bloc.
Early on, he sensed that the issue that was going to drive the vote here in Florida was going to be Social Security and prescription drug costs, senior issues.
Analysts believe the election could be won in Central Florida along Interstate 4 from Tampa through Orlando to Daytona Beach.
The folks that have moved in there they're not strong partisans. They're people who are independent in their political thinking.
The next United States Senator from Florida is going to be Bill McCollum.
The closeness of the presidential race will likely affect Florida's tight U.S. Senate race. Republicans hope Congressman Bill McCollum will replace retiring Republican Connie Mack. But Democrats view the seat as a likely pickup and are betting on State Insurance Commissioner Bill Nelson.
I want to ask every one of everybody here for your vote.
Historically, for Republicans, a win in Florida's presidential race is considered essential. No Republican has made it to the White House without winning Florida since 1924. Mark Potter, CNN, Miami.
Well, Florida is just one of several states where the race for the White House is incredibly close. Our analyst Hal Bruno joins us now with a look at a couple of those contests. Hal?
Well, hi, Judy. You see this map behind me. You see red for Bush in Indiana and Kentucky. Everything else is gray. That means the polls haven't closed yet in those states. When they do, we'll start reporting them, and they'll be red for Bush, blue for Al Gore, and a lot of them are going to be yellow, which means it's too close to call. And those are the states in particular that we're going to be talking about. I'm going to go into my John Madden routine here and show you on this handy little telestrator. Let's look at Florida, which is one of the most important ones. This is part of George Bush's electoral vote base that he has to win. And Al Gore is mounted, as our correspondent said, a very serious challenge there, appealing to the senior citizens who are 21% of the state vote, 65 and over, using the health care issues and Social Security. Now, the strength of the Democrats is here in Miami, and it goes up the East Coast, called the Gold Coast, all the way up to West Palm Beach through Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood. This is where the Democrats have to build up a huge margin in order to counter the Republican strength in other parts of the states. Now, you've got the Cubans in Miami who are mainly Republicans. That's about 12%. But you got Jewish voters who are about 6%, and you got African-American voters who are about 10% of the state vote concentrated in these areas. Now, the Republican strength is over here along the Gulf Coast, up through central Florida, up into the north and out into the Panhandle. Then you have the Tampa Bay area. That's the swing area that can go either Republican or Democratic. And this is where the Florida battle is being fought. Take a look at Pennsylvania now. Pennsylvania is the must-win state for Al Gore, and his strength is concentrated right here in Philadelphia. He's got to come out of there with about maybe a 300,000, 400,000 majority to counter what the Republican strength is in the rest of the state. Also up here in the southeast, that could be Democratic too. That's where the Reagan Republicans were back in the 1980s. The Republican strength, though, is all through north into central Pennsylvania, down here into the southeast. Then you get to Pittsburgh in the west, up here in Erie. This is all the swing area. This can go either Republican or Democrat and could very well determine who carries this state.
Hal, a quick question. The selection of Joe Lieberman makes how much of a difference for Al Gore in Florida?
Well, it's like noodle soup. It can't hurt him. But in terms of trying to get out the Jewish vote, you can't do much more than is already there naturally. They have about the highest percentage of voting of any group in the country.
All right.
Hal Bruto. We'll be checking in with you again and again. When we come back, Farai Chideya and Tucker Carlson, their thoughts on Election 2000 as CNN's coverage continues throughout the evening.
The internet is faster because of us.
The internet is more reliable because of us.
The internet is growing because of us.
The internet is more exciting because of us.
The internet goes everywhere because of us. The internet is better because of us.
Delivering the most content from the world's biggest network, Akamai.
Hello? Server? Got it.
Total participation. And this means everyone, all working to make sure you get the absolute best experience possible.
Mr. Thurber, you're all set.
5-star. So demanding, only our best retailers make the cut. It's better. We'll prove it. Only where you see these signs.
Where do you find inspiration? What if the things you do every day could be done with tools so instinctive, using them would be like riding a bike? If technology became your silent partner, imagine what you could imagine. We believe it's time to move beyond information technology to inspiration technology. Welcome to the new IT from Compaq.
E-learning is critical for global business. It is the future,
Centra is creating a new world
where people can interact,
collaborate, and learn.
in virtual classrooms, online workspaces,
web conferences, and e-meetings. Software that harnesses the power of corporate networks and the internet.
software to help people,
Work together.
In real time,
getting more done in less time.
Centra.
the leader in live e-learning.
We can expect in the coming months is Director of Product Development, Paul Noon.
My speech.
Got it. Nortel Networks is building the new high-performance internet, the wireless internet, with optical technology that makes it faster.
Overall, this has been an exciting
and more
year.
reliable.
But the next few months will mark the beginning of a new Gesundheit.
Come together.
In fact, with technology changing
over me.
Coming up at the top of the hour. During the 7 p.m. hour in the eastern U.S., polls in 9 more states will close on Election 2000. These states hold 106 electoral votes. New Hampshire, Vermont, Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida close at the top of the hour, while West Virginia, Ohio, and North Carolina close at 7:30. One of the important battleground states, Florida, alone wields 25 electoral votes. An increasingly Republican state, Florida voted twice for President George Bush and has another Bush, Jeb, as its governor. The hot-button issue here is undoubtedly Medicare, with almost 1/4 of the electorate over the age of 65. But going into the final days of this campaign, Florida was still up for grabs.
And joining us now, Tucker Carlson of the Weekly Standard and Farai Shadea of popandpolitics.com. Farai, first to you. At this hour, coming up at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, CNN will have some more races to call. What are you concentrating on right now?
Well, certainly I want to look at Florida. I mean, we're talking about a massive amount of electoral votes, and I think that the vice president has got to feel fairly comfortable that he's got a good shot at this. The polls were giving him a slight edge, and I think that even when you talk about the gains the Republican Party has made with Latinos, most Latinos are not going to vote Republican. And seniors are still very concerned about their medical benefits and very concerned about Social Security. So I think this is a state which is very much in play and leaning towards the Democrats.
Tucker, your concentration this hour.
Well, maybe the next hour. I mean, I think it would be Pennsylvania. I think it's probably the closest battleground state of them all, apparently tied, and is tracked very closely with the overall outcome in the past 5 elections. I mean, it went for Bush's father and then Clinton twice in the last 2. And as I said, it's tied. So I think when Pennsylvania closes and is called, you'll get a pretty good sense of what's going to happen.
And Tucker, where do you think it's going to come down to, the crunch area? Will it be the battleground states or will it be the smaller states in terms of electoral votes?
Well, the Bush strategy seems to be, I mean, obviously it's evolving, but it seems to sort of come down to winning enough of the small states to win overall. Can you do that? I mean, they say you can, and it looks like mathematically you can. And if they're going to win, that's probably how they're going to do it, by sort of seeding the bigger states, obviously New York and California, and then picking up virtually everything else. Can you do it? Yeah, probably.
Farai?
I agree. I mean, if there is a Bush victory, the bigger states are really looking as if they might go for the Democrats. And what's interesting here is that the heartland is fairly comfortably going for Bush. I mean, you've looked at the support for Bush going much more for, the white men going comfortably for the Bush camp, and married white women looking much more like Bush voters. And so I think that we're going to see a lot of the Midwest and the heartland going for Bush.
It's Jeff Greenfield, folks. In terms of the hopes and dreams of the more ideologically committed, whether on the left or on the right, it seems to me it's going to be almost impossible, if this race does turn out as close as everybody is predicting, for anyone to claim a mandate to do pretty much of anything. Do you folks agree or demur?
Well, I can't wait for the symposiums after the symposia, where everyone sits around, often on college campuses or in think tanks here in Washington, and sips water and tries to figure out what it all meant. And I think it's going to be far more confusing this year than certainly in my lifetime. I'm really interested to see the Nader numbers. I mean, it seems like Bush is going to win Wisconsin, and I wouldn't be surprised if he wins in a way that makes it obvious that Nader allowed him to win. Nader is strong in Wisconsin, and again, we won't know for several hours exactly what effect Nader had, but I bet it's a real one, and I would be surprised if the Green Party, in whatever form it takes after this election, doesn't stick around in a way, because there's a need for it in a way that I don't think there's ever been a need for the Reform Party.
Right. I would have to agree, and I think that what's interesting is that the Green Party actually has a platform. The Reform Party, aside from some vague notions about, you know, a flat tax, really never had a platform. The Green Party has a multitude of very firm platforms. It is very much against the death penalty. It is very much for environmental reform. It is very much for campaign finance reform. And so this is a party that actually has platforms, and regardless of who wins, it's going to push for them.
Farai Shadea, Tucker Carlson, thanks very much. We'll check in with you again later on this evening. Judy?
Just 7 minutes away from polls closing in 6 states, including that crucial state of Florida. Before we do that, we'll hear from the Capitol Gang after this break.
Log on to CNN.com for all the Election Day information you need, from the latest polls, projections, and results on demand. It's all at CNN.com.
We are a startup company based here in Tennessee, and we sell ideas.
I've been here 37 years myself. I came with the building.
27 employees.
780 people here. Narrow margins means you got to crank out a lot of product.
People that we're trying to attract are very perk savvy.
You know, keeping workers today is a matter of providing security to their family.
One of our most effective recruiting tools is Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. More hospitals, more doctors.
We say Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee makes them feel good.
From 2 employees to 2,000, we're Blue Cross Blue Shield of Business in Tennessee.
Sometimes I cheer too hard. I can't help it. Sports on Demand on digital cable lets me see all the games I want to see. Oh, I've had glove rash, I've had foam burn, I've had fan elbow. Yeah, there's risk involved. I accept that.
Sports in Demand on digital cable. Complete sports packages for total sports fans. Call your cable company today.
No, this was a boating accident.
For over 100 Thanksgivings, Kroger has set the table for more family gatherings than any other grocery store in America. And to say thanks this holiday season, you'll find hundreds of Kroger Plus Card specials like these. Riverside turkeys are buy one, get one free. Half gallons of Kroger orange juice are 99 cents, and boneless half pork loin is just $1.99 a pound. Thanksgiving at Kroger. One more reason to go Krogering.
A special midnight edition of Larry King Live tonight on CNN.
As we wait for those 7 o'clock Eastern poll closings, there's no one we'd rather hear from than CNN's own Capitol Gang. Let's go to you guys now.
Thank you, Judy. I'm Al Hunt with the Capitol Gang, Robert Novak, Margaret Carlson, and Cato Byrne. All right, Margaret, you first. Is this going to be a nail-biter?
This election is so close that Dick Cheney voted. I saw it with my own eyes. They had him on TV doing it. You know, the atmospherics of today were exactly the way the campaign has gone. Bush interviewed, sipping coffee, said he was going to have a long lunch, a short nap. He was calm as could be. His campaign put out his schedule for tomorrow, the heading on it, President-elect Bush. Al Gore, by contrast, went to vote in a school, turned to this hapless group of students who were there to cheer him on, and held a town meeting.
Bob, this is the way you used to cover elections. We didn't know the results until the votes came in, right?
Results. One thing we do know about today was there was a terrific African-American outpouring in key states. And that is very important. The second thing is that we didn't used to have is we have lots and lots of absentee votes. I am told by one numbers cruncher that in Florida, where the polls close in just in 5 minutes, that their probable Republican advantage in absentee votes of 150,000 votes. So in other words, Al Gore in this very key state has to start with winning by at least 150,000. The other thing is that I've heard from a lot of people say you have to win, the Republicans have to win Florida to win the election. It'd be nice for them, but I don't think that's so.
Kate, Indiana and Kentucky have closed. Did we learn anything?
Well, Republicans sure hope so. Kentucky is a bellwether state. They've been with the winner the last 9 times. And if you look at what the vote looked like in Kentucky, George Bush carried women decisively, independents 2-1, and 25% of Democrats. So I think Republicans certainly hope that Kentucky is a bellwether again. But the states that are going to close within a few minutes are also key to Bush. You know, he's got South Carolina, he's got Georgia, he's got Virginia. He needs them all. He's hoping New Hampshire will be friendlier to him in November than it was in February. So the stakes are getting...
I would just say one thing about Indiana. Frank O'Bannon, the Democratic governor, a giant killer. He beat Steve Goldsmith, the GOP star of the future 4 years ago, beat Dave McIntosh, GOP star of the future. I think everything you said is right. I think, as always, that Gore has to do the trifecta. He has to win Florida, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. But I also think, in addition to that, he probably is going to have to win some of those smaller states. So all eyes will be on Florida after 7 o'clock, but little New Hampshire may matter, too.
Yeah.
And
Because
Margaret,
eyes will be on Dade County in part, because if Gore wins big there, he'll win the
and
state.
Margaret,
That's
a final word from you. I think Bob made a very telling point, though. The African-American vote could be decisive.
You know, the turnout was so heartening. I mean, it was like you'd think...
Heartening for who?
For anybody, for a citizen, because the turnout's been going down. It looked like El Salvador with the lines around the block at these. Yes, it is, because people waited in line to vote. People will wait for nothing in America, and I expected to see Jimmy Carter certifying the vote. It was so there was such a heavy turnout.
Let me say something about the trifecta.
Say it quickly.
The trifecta, that's Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Florida. Gore could win all of those and still lose the election.
We cut you off on your trifecta. We now go to our election headquarters in Atlanta, where it's 7 p.m. in the East. Polls have just closed in Florida, New Hampshire, and Virginia.
From CNN Center in Atlanta, coverage of Election 2000 continues. Here again, Judy Woodruff, Bernard Shaw, Jeff Greenfield, and Bill Schneider.
At 7 o'clock, the polls have closed in certain states, and CNN is looking at what is going on in Florida. This race between Gore and Bush, too close to call, Jeff.
This is the one we'll be watching all night. Gore made 19 visits to the state, Bush 13. They poured in millions of dollars. 4th biggest prize, and it's up for grabs.
Mike McCurry says what's going on tonight is a ground war, a massive one, and look at this. Look at the war in Georgia. Vice President Gore, Governor Bush, this race for CNN at this hour, too close to call.
And this has got to be a shocker in Austin. They had this race put away in their pocket for weeks, if not months. We'll see.
Let's go to Thomas Jefferson State. What's happening in Virginia? Again, the race, too close to call.
Bernie, Virginia has not voted for a Democrat for president since Lyndon Johnson in 1964. It is the heart of the Republican base in the South. They should have won this one going away.
In New Hampshire, Governor Bush lost the primary there, but right now it's neck and neck between his opponent and himself. Looking at South Carolina with its 8 electoral votes, Governor Bush has won another southern state tonight. And in Vermont, Vice President Gore wins Vermont's 3 electoral votes. Now, for your viewers watching our coverage, this is the electoral map. Every time we call states, we will tell you what the totals are, and it's Governor Bush 28 electoral votes, Vice President Gore 3 at this very early hour in our election night coverage.
Some stunning numbers, I think. Well, maybe stunning is too strong a word, but some real surprises here, Bernie. I think that all of us are sitting back a little bit at the news that we can't call Georgia. We're not able to call Virginia. This is a state, as Jeff suggested, has gone Republican how many times? 11 out of the last 12 presidential elections?
Only Lyndon Johnson took it. And we should emphasize, this doesn't mean that we think it's going the other way. It just means right now we don't think we can call it. But given how certain all of us were that Virginia and Georgia were going for Bush, it's a little surprising.
Well, in keeping with what Hal Bruner was talking about, and Mike McCurry saying what's going on at this hour across this country is a massive ground war. He talked about Florida. He took us up the East Coast. He talked about the Republican strength in the Panhandle and Tampa being the swing area.
Right. Well, the ground war, a lot of it is going on among African Americans, who are, of course, a very prominent constituency in Georgia and in Virginia. Again, those are states expected to be Republican, but a heavy African American vote could really turn it.
We have, ladies and gentlemen, some Senate calls to make. First, in Florida, Bill Nelson, the state insurance commissioner, has beaten Congressman Bill McCollum. You will recognize him as one of the House impeachment managers. This is a pickup for the Democrats. Connie Mack, the Republican who could have won easily, most people think, retired. In Georgia, Zell Miller, former governor appointed to fill the seat when Paul Coverdale died, has defeated former Senator Mac Mattingly, and by enough of a margin to avoid the runoff that Georgia law requires. This is a hold. And in Virginia, one of the most closely watched, Chuck Robb, the senator and former Governor George Allen, son of the legendary football coach, locked in a race too close to call. Robb was considered the single most vulnerable Democratic incumbent. We are often running for control of the Senate as well. It's still going to be a very long and fascinating night.
Bill Snyder, the voters are talking as they leave the polls in Florida, in New Hampshire. What are some of the things they're indicating?
Well, Florida, we just said, was a toss-up state, and we can't call it yet. You think of Florida, you think of seniors. They're a quarter of the voters in Florida. Supposedly, Al Gore has seniors locked up in his lockbox because of the Social Security issue. But take a look here. Look at the way seniors are voting. They're almost splitting 50-50 between Gore and Bush. Bush has a narrow edge. That's not supposed to be happening. That's why Florida is too close to call. And we also said New Hampshire is a state that's too close to call. Gore is fighting hard in New Hampshire. Let's take a look at John McCain's supporters. He endorsed George Bush, and they are going almost 60% for George Bush over Al Gore. Gore thought he had an edge with McCain supporters because he said he endorsed campaign finance reform much more strongly than George Bush did. McCain supporters are a key constituency in New Hampshire. Remember New Hampshire in that primary? McCain beat Bush in that primary. McCain supporters are now going for Bush. Is it just Republican Party loyalty? I don't think so, and here's why. Only 1/3 of the voters of New Hampshire call themselves Republicans. Half the voters of New Hampshire call themselves McCain supporters. The McCain Party is a lot bigger than the Republican Party.
And what's fascinating, Bernie, is that New Hampshire is the one state in New England where the liberal Republicans still live that is generally considered conservative. And yet, in this most conservative New England states, where I think the Bush campaign really had its hopes to get it, we still can't call it for either. Anyway.
Let me make a quick point here. You mentioned McCain's strength in New Hampshire. A lot of speculation that if Governor Bush loses to Vice President Gore tonight, the heir apparent in the Republican Party will be the man from Arizona.
That's right. Well, he argued many times that he thought that Bush couldn't win because he needed a bigger message than just the conservative message, and he urged Bush to become the reform candidate, and Bush adopted part of that message. So McCain would be in a position to say, I told you so. But remember something, he's played the good soldier. He endorsed George Bush, he campaigned for Republicans, so Republicans have no complaint about John McCain trying to undermine Bush.
And especially when he was dealing with the skin cancer and he had to take time out to be treated and recover from that too.
It was also speculated that in New Hampshire, and we don't have any way of knowing if this is the case yet, that New Hampshire may be one of the few places where Ralph Nader could be hurting George Bush because of those very McCain voters from earlier this year. All right, let's go over to the Balance of Power desk, arena, I should say, and talk to Wolf Blitzer. Wolf, what are you saying?
Judy, in Vermont, we're ready now to declare the incumbent Republican Senator Jim Jeffords a moderate Republican, well known for his liberal point of view. He has been reelected against Ed Flanagan, the first openly gay U.S. Senate nominee of a major party. Let's take a look at the new balance of power in the U.S. Senate right now. With the win of Bill Nelson, the Democrat in Florida, the balance of power has now tilted one toss-up state going for the Democrats. The Democrats one gain in their need for 5, Stuart Rothenberg, to become the majority power in the Senate.
Well, Wolf, McCollum, of course, was one of the House impeachment managers. He started out behind. A lot of Republican insiders, both in Washington but also in Florida, wondered whether he really had enough appeal statewide to beat somebody like Bill Nelson. Obviously, he closed, but he didn't get over the top.
It would be interesting to look at the exit polls to see if that fact that Bill McCollum was an impeachment manager had any significant impact in his defeat today. Let's take a look at the House of Representatives, we're now ready to declare in Kentucky Representative Ernie Fletcher, the Republican, the winner over former Representative Scotty Basler. It looks like a pretty significant victory. There's no change, though, in terms of a pickup in the House of Representatives. Still the same as it was before. The Democrats need 7.
Well, if this is a big race, though, I think a year ago many insiders would have said Ernie Fletcher is headed for defeat. Scotty Basler, a former member of Congress from this congressional district, a statewide candidate who narrowly lost the U.S. Senate bid. Allegedly, the issue of Patients' Bill of Rights was going to hurt Fletcher, who is a doctor. The doctors switched positions. They supported him 2 years ago, but not this time. Instead, that issue did not hurt him. He was successful. He was able to neutralize it at the end of the campaign. Basler turned to guns as an issue. And in fact, the NRA supported Scotty Fletcher, as did the Republican Majority Issues Committee, Tom DeLay's group. This is a big win for the Republicans.
All right, let's take a look at the governor races right now in New England. 2 governor races. The incumbent Jeanne Shaheen facing a challenge from former Senator Gordon Humphrey. Right now, the vote is much too early to call, and we don't know who is going to be the next the winner of that race between Jeanne Shaheen and Gordon Humphrey. As far as Vermont is concerned, Howard Dean, the incumbent Democrat, it looks like he may come in first, but he may not get, according to our exit polls, the 50% he needs in order to be reelected. There could be a runoff in that gubernatorial race. Vermont is a state where Governor Dean signed into law the so-called gay marriage rights provision.
Right, civil unions. And really, we've been watching Vermont, which has been trending Democratic for some time, and of course went to the vice president today. We've been watching that state to see whether this issue, civil unions, is going to redefine the politics of the state, re-energize conservatives. Not yet clear.
All right, Stuart Rothenberg will have a lot more. Back to Bernie on the national desk.
Thank you, Wolf. And quickly now to Missouri, where on the ballot, a dead man's name is in contention. And correspondent Kate Snow has some news.
Well, Bernie, we're hearing here in Missouri that the state's Democratic Party asked for the city of St. Louis, they asked a federal judge to keep the polls open late. That because turnout here has been a real factor today. They have had incredible turnout here in the city of St. Louis. We've just learned that a judge has ruled, a federal judge, to keep the polls open until 10 p.m. local time. That's 11 p.m. Eastern time. The judge, according to Democrats here, saying, quote, the Board of Elections didn't live up to its obligations to allow the citizens of St. Louis to vote. That coming from a federal judge here in the city of St. Louis. I can also tell you that I've talked to the County Board of Elections here in St. Louis County. This, of course, being one of the most populated areas of the state of Missouri. St. Louis County telling us they have a 2-hour line right now, and they are not going to count any results until everyone has had a chance to vote here tonight. One more note, Bernie. In Kansas City, the state Democratic Party also asked for a federal judge to allow polls to remain open late in Kansas City. That request in Kansas City proper was denied. Bernie?
Kate Snow, what are Republicans saying about this late development, which is very significant, and how might this bear on turnout, given the dynamics of the race, the widow Jean Carnahan, her late husband running against Senator John Ashcroft, the incumbent Republican? What about the dynamics of this right now?
Right. Well, Bernie, these notes just coming in now, so I have not had a chance to talk with the Republican State Party yet, but I can imagine that there will be some concern. That's because these two areas, Kansas City and St. Louis, both urban areas, both Democratic strongholds, and clearly, if the polls are kept open in these urban centers, that could potentially help the Democrats. And clearly, if the polls are kept open in these urban centers, that could potentially help the Democrats. There was a lot of talk here over the last couple of weeks since the passing of Governor Mel Carnahan about whether people would turn out in droves in his memory. That may be part of what we're seeing here today. The state board, the state secretary saying, the Secretary of State's office saying that they think they're going to have a record turnout here in the state of Missouri. Bernie?
Kate Snow, we're going to come back to you, of course, later tonight. Judy?
All right, much more ahead in our special election coverage. We've got more polls closing in 3 states at 7:30 Eastern. A lot ahead. Stay with us.
Coverage of Election 2000 is brought to you by America's pharmaceutical companies and Ditech.com. For expanded coverage, log on to CNN.com. America's pharmaceutical companies and Ditech.com. Home loan savings direct from the lender.
My sister has one of the most devastating forms of arthritis. Dangerous side effects really prevented her from taking medications that would ease her pain. At my pharmaceutical company, we work to discover medicines that are as effective for that pain, but with fewer side effects. To know that we're helping millions of people every day, it's a high point of my career. To know that I've helped my sister is the high point of my life.
Got yourself into too much credit card debt? Why not point and click your way out of debt with a second mortgage from Ditech.com? Whether you have equity or no equity, good credit or not so good credit, Ditech has a second mortgage with absolutely no closing costs to help you lower your monthly payments now. So point and click your way out of high-interest, non-tax deductible credit card debt at Ditech.com or call us at 1-800-71-FIX.
How many experts does it take to predict a market change?
Tickets, folks. I'm out.
Tax laws have changed. Should I be looking at my estate plan again?
Anyone who knows me wouldn't recommend a stock like this.
Oh, not again. This guy.
Investment strategies for you. Great. Just for me and 5 million other people.
Thank you, Bain-Weber.
The internet goes everywhere because of us.
The internet is more reliable because of us.
The internet is growing because of us.
The internet is more exciting because of us. The internet is faster because of us.
The internet is better because of us.
Delivering the most content from the world's biggest network, Akamai.
Looking to save more and spend less this holiday season? With the Chrysler Holiday Sale, you can do just that. Because now you can save over $5,100 when you buy a new 2000 Concorde LX with 0% financing. Or choose a low $259 lease on the award-winning 2001 Sebring LX sedan. So take advantage of the Chrysler Holiday Sale today for savings that let you spend more on a real holiday priority, yourself.
The night is young, but this election is riveting. We've had polls close in, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 states, 8 states so far. We have been able to call George Bush the winner in 4 of those states, most of them, no surprise, Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, and Vermont. But the story at this hour is that the following states still too close to call: Virginia, New Hampshire, Georgia, Florida. At this hour, still too close to call in the presidential race. It doesn't mean that they may not fall one way or another, Jeff Greenfield, but
I just want to point out,
now we can't.
No, I think we called Vermont for Gore
You're
rather
right.
than
I'm
Bush.
sorry. I'm sorry, and my mistake.
I don't think that will swing the election, but I might as well get on the record with 3 electoral votes.
I appreciate being corrected. I'm sure it won't be the first mistake
that I make
tonight. Joining us now, speaking of states won and states we're not able to call, we're going to go right to Nashville, Tennessee, and our correspondent there, John King, who's been with the Bush campaign through much of this campaign, and simultaneously to Austin, Texas, to our own Candy Crowley. Candy, about some of these states that we're not able to call yet that I think some of us might have assumed would already be in Governor Bush's corner, namely Virginia and Georgia. Any reaction there from the people you're talking with?
Well, you know, they are still optimistic here. It's tempered by the closeness of the race, which they say they expected. But I can tell you, when you talk to the Bush people, strategists and aides, they have several ways that they can put together an electoral map that shows it in the Bush winning column. So they're sort of watching this as like moving around saying, well, if we lose here but we win here, then this will happen. So they're still sort of looking at the map and feeling that it favors them.
John King.
A nervous urgency here tonight, Judy. Usually campaigns are over at this time. The candidates watching the results. Not so in this race because it's so close. The vice president and Senator Lieberman, we're told, still making calls, satellite interviews, radio interviews, their wives both making calls. Just spoke to a White House official who says the President of the United States has made 40 calls himself, still making some at this hour, trying to turn out the Democratic vote. What they're looking at is nobody here expects Virginia or Georgia to end up in the Democratic column, but they think New Hampshire might be an opportunity to grab a few electoral votes. They thought were going to go the other way. The man who directs the ground war for the vice president is a gentleman named Michael Hooley from Boston, Massachusetts. He called Senator Ted Kennedy today. He called the mayor of Boston, Thomas Menino, today, asked them to send anybody and everybody they could north of the border to try to turn out the vote late into the night in New Hampshire. They believe they may need those because they might lose here in the home state of Tennessee, although they're again working late into the night trying to pull this state out. They believe they will win. They are predicting they will win Florida, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, the big three as we're calling them, but they think they need 10 to 15 more electoral votes to get over the top. Still hunting for those, even though the night is growing late.
Candy, it's Jeff Greenfield. We've heard a lot about what the Gore campaign is doing, dispatching Jesse Jackson, dispatching Ted Kennedy, Michael Hooley, who, if Gore wins, may get an ambassadorship because he's in charge of the turnout. But what about the Bush people? Are they making any last-minute efforts to get out their base?
Sure, and they've had it in place, you know, for some time. But look at some of these places. Look at Michigan, look at Wisconsin, look at Pennsylvania, and who do you have in charge of those states? 3 Republican governors, John Engler, Tommy Thompson, and Tom Ridge. So, you know, there's machinery in place there and people on the ground there. They're in close contact with them, but they do have those kinds of mechanisms in place. Obviously, in Florida, Jeb Bush is governor there. While he's here, he has, his whole state machine there. So they have some things in place, but they have been working on voter turnout, they tell me, for 17 months since it began, and putting out phone calls. But yes, there are still last-minute phone calls. You saw George Bush making some of them this morning. But on the ground and in the states, yes, they're still manning the phone banks, still knocking on doors, and still looking for people to go out and vote.
John King, the news from St. Louis that the polls are going to stay open later there, and we're looking at pictures now of Governor George Bush arriving at, I believe, is it the hotel in Austin where he's going to be watching the returns, Candy?
Actually, he's going to a restaurant next door with his father, his mother, and his brother Jeb. But they will be watching the election returns from a local hotel here, yes.
It was a little dark, but we'll take the word of our cinematographers that was indeed Governor Bush getting out of the car. John King, I was just going to ask about the word from St. Louis from Kate Snow that a judge has ruled that they can keep the polls open later there. Any particular reaction from the Gore folks?
Not to that specific decision, but we do know Donna Brazile, the Gore campaign manager, was here earlier tonight speaking to us. She's the key architect of the African-American turnout. She said they were calling all around the country to make sure, touching base with mayors to make sure the polls were open if necessary, even a few times calling the Justice Department today to report what they considered intimidating tactics in cities around the country. African-American turnout obviously very critical to the vice president's chances. While we were here interviewing Donna Brazile, we talk a lot about telephone calls and phone banks. There's new technology now, too. You can get email on your pagers. And even as she was standing here, a state representative from the Philadelphia area sent her an email saying, I need you to call this radio station. Can you get the vice president or the president to call this radio station? We need reinforcements. So late into the night, the ground war continuing. The Gore campaign has what it's called the 2-11s strategy, meaning it thinks it needs to win 2 of the states that have 11 electoral votes. They believe Washington State will be one of those. The 3 others, Tennessee, Missouri, and Wisconsin. You just mentioned Missouri. Of those 3, Tennessee, Missouri, and Wisconsin, they don't think Missouri is the one they will win tonight, although that turnout obviously encouraging.
Candy, as we hear about these techniques that John is referring to, literally calling people at the last minute saying, can you get the president or the vice president on the phone with a radio station? Is this the kind of thing that the Republicans are doing?
They are. George Bush did some radio interviews this morning. Again, he has people in the states themselves who are doing interviews with local media and that kind of thing. So, there's a lot of people on the ground, and again, it's an organization that they have built up. I remember during the primary, they kept saying this is a 50-state campaign, and now we have headquarters in 42 of them and 43 of them, and they were up with 50 as early as April. So they've had these organizations in place. They say they've had more volunteers than they've ever had in a Republican presidential campaign. They have felt pretty good about this ground war coming into this day, and they feel pretty good about it now.
All right, Candy Crowley in Austin, John King in Nashville, thank you both. We're going to give you a little break, but you know we're going to be coming back to you often throughout the night. Much more ahead in 8 minutes. 3 more states have poll closings. We'll be right back. Joining us now once again from Washington, Mike McCurry, former Clinton White House press secretary, and Mary Madeline, co-host of CNN's Crossfire. To you both, these results from 7 o'clock, not able to call. We are able to call South Carolina for George Bush, Vermont for Al Gore, but when it comes to Virginia, Georgia, and Florida, no surprise, we can't call them yet for either one. Mary, what do you make of this?
Well, I make a cautiousness that will ultimately result, if I know for a fact that Virginia, and I mean I would stake my life on Virginia and Georgia going for Governor Bush, and I believe that Florida's going to go for him. And again, it's a point that we made earlier that is unseeable at this point, and that is the efforts of the ground game, including the prolific absentee ballot requests, which the Bush campaign knows by checking back on the records, were preponderantly for Republican requests, and that makes up 1 or 2 points in the polls.
Mike, are you surprised that we're not able to call this? Bernie, I'm going to interrupt and throw to Mike. Excuse me, Bernard Shaw, my colleague.
CNN is going to report a call in Virginia. Virginia, CNN declares, goes to Texas Governor George Bush. This is just in. 13 electoral votes in Thomas Jefferson's state.
Well, that is no surprise, and I think, Mary, you were prescient, if fairly, not the longest shot of the night. That a state that hadn't voted for a Democrat for president since Lyndon Johnson would probably tilt in that direction. It may well be that we just want to say that we are not being, we're being cautious enough so that we know what we're doing. But Mary and Michael, pick up this theme about turnout, okay? About the fact that this late hour, people are out there driving people out to vote.
Well, one thing, Jeff, I think that it would be good to remind viewers how these exit polls work and just walk them through the process. There has to be some checking. The voter service that actually collects these numbers, does the interviews, you need to go back and check the data you get precinct by precinct with some actual counts from real voters to make sure that your model for predicting some of these results are right. I think it's very appropriate for networks to hold back and wait until they know for sure what the answer is before they make one of these calls. That's what's going on here. I think that's appropriate. One of the things that may be happening is an extraordinary effort at turnout. Now, we've heard some reports about Missouri, elsewhere, where there's even some legal action at this late hour to make sure that people get the opportunity to vote. That could indicate that there is a very extensive turnout effort underway that maybe some of the exit pollsters want to consider.
All right, Mike McCurry, Mary Madeline, we'll come back to you shortly. We are just about 2 minutes away from poll closings in 3 states. We'll be right back.
Closed captioning for this program has been provided by Verizon Communications.
It's a world of rare insight and unique perspective. Unconventional Wisdom with Jeff Greenfield. Fridays, 10 Eastern on CNN.
Channel 2 Action News with anchors Monica Kaufman and John Pruitt. For major news. 1,500 people remain stranded by rising. For breaking news.
Updating a breaking story.
For news with balance, clarity, and depth. Every day. Clark Howard's consumer reports that will save you money. Health news that could affect your life. And Glenn Burns' detailed weather forecast. But a most complete, in-depth coverage every day. Channel 2 Action News. Coverage you can count on.
You've seen the debates.
It's time for a fresh start.
You've heard the speeches.
I want to focus on results.
Tonight, only one station offers convenient election coverage. 11 Alive News and NBC News join forces to bring you the most immediate results. And starting at 7, 11 Alive delivers live local coverage on TV 33. Join Brenda Wood and Wes Sargentson for Decision 2000, tonight on TV 33.
A special midnight edition of Larry King Live tonight on CNN.
From CNN Center in Atlanta, coverage of Election 2000 continues. Here again, Judy Woodruff, Bernard Shaw, Jeff Greenfield, and Bill Schneider.
It is 7:30 p.m. on the East Coast, where the polls have closed in Ohio, North Carolina, and West Virginia. And to show you the extent of the ground war between these two gentlemen, we are not able to call Ohio yet in the presidential race for the White House. Too close to call in Ohio. Too close to call in the Tar Heel state of North Carolina, with its 14 electoral votes up. And too close to call in West Virginia, with its 5 electoral votes.
And as we look at the electoral map, we are obviously putting none of these states in anybody's column, but we should note once again that in any puzzle that adds up to the White House for George W. Bush, Ohio and North Carolina have to be in that puzzle. West Virginia, which is a predominantly Democratic state, is one of those states that the Republicans thought they could take away from the Democrats.
Wherever you see yellow, that's a uh-oh. We can't tell you anything about that state, Judy.
Ohio is a state, as we know, that has no Republican has ever won the White House without Ohio. We can say the same thing about Illinois, which we'll be talking about in the next hour or so. 2 states, at least symbolically important for George W. Bush. Just because we cannot call Ohio right now doesn't mean it's not going to end up in his corner later. But for the time being, as Bernie said, still very hard fought there on the ground.
Bill Schneider, what are you hearing?
What I'm hearing is West Virginia, that's remarkable in the sense that that ought to be an easy win for Al Gore. It's only voted for Republican twice in the last 10 elections. Remember in 1992, Bush called Gore ozone man? Well, we asked voters in West Virginia, which is more important to you, promoting economic growth or protecting the environment? In West Virginia,
those are not environmentalists. They say economic growth by almost 2 to 1 is more important to them. And the people who cited economic growth voted very heavily for George W. Bush. And that may explain another interesting pattern we're seeing in West Virginia. You know, the union vote is supposed to be going heavily for Al Gore. Unions are delivering for him. Well, among voters from union households in West Virginia, they are splitting their vote almost evenly between Gore and Bush, probably because of concern over Gore's environmental stand.
Which leads us to another of the keys that we have been talking about. We asked about social issues, the environment, which plays well for Democrats in places like California. But in this state, it's, as you say, it seems that the fear of Gore's environmentalism has hurt him among lunch bucket union Democrats. And that's why this traditionally Democratic state may be in play.
Yep.
It's a state where coal is big. And for those folks who worry about the coal industry and the income that they earn, the jobs that they have from that industry, much of what Al Gore has said is threatening to them.
That's right.
Rightly or wrongly.
Gore
They feel
has
threatened by
used the environmental issue in his book, Earth and the Balance, to appeal to soccer moms who are very concerned about the environment, suburban voters, and also, of course, to help fend off the threat from Ralph Nader. But we're seeing in West Virginia there can be a downside to that strong environmentalism.
This ground war is just a marvel to think that at 7:32 Eastern Time, CNN cannot call Ohio, which, as you indicated, is a Republican must. It's been a tradition. We can't call other states, West Virginia. This is a marvel.
I think what Bill Schneider said, I guess it's 2.5 hours ago, I think we'll be talking about this for hours, that this is a country fundamentally divided on two of the central premises of any election. Is it time for a change, or do you want to stay the course? And this country appears to be, on issue after issue, you know, so far, cutting it right down the middle.
And you know, Governor Bush's father, George Herbert Walker Bush, said that he thought the reason why he lost to Bill Clinton was that the American people wanted a change. And not surprisingly, former President Bush says he believes in this instance tonight on this election 2000, the American people want a change and will elect his son.
some kind of change, maybe not, maybe prosperity they want to continue. They want to change in style of leadership. Maybe they want to change in values, which is something that George W. Bush, the son, talked a lot about during the campaign.
What we're finding is a remarkable number of Americans, 50%, sometimes more in some states.
Let me interrupt you for a moment. I'm getting some information. CNN now declares that Governor Bush has won another state in the South. This one, Georgia, and its 13 electoral votes.
Expected, and that is an important win for Governor Bush.
And it illustrates what we were pointing out. The fact that we say a state is too close to call doesn't necessarily mean that the state is really in play or it's 50-50. It simply means at that moment we can't do it. Georgia is a state that President Clinton contested, actually carried it in one of his...
in 92, by 1 percentage point.
Right, and then lost it by a couple. But it is certainly no shock that these southern states ought to be falling like dominoes for George W. Bush. I mean, ever since the Civil Rights Revolution of '64, the South has been a state that's very hard for Democrats to win, and you've got to be from the South or a border state to do it. Carter, Clinton.
This is how our electoral map looks at 7:34 Eastern Time. Governor Bush far ahead of Vice President Gore, 54 electoral votes to 3 so far. And the yellow you see, wherever you see yellow on our electoral map, that means that that state in particular is too close to call.
One of those states, Bernie, too close to call, Ohio. We've been saying, of course, all the polls that were done leading up to this election showed it was going to be pretty comfortably in George W. Bush's corner, but it's also a state that Bill Clinton won narrowly 2 times in 1992 and 1996.
That's right.
So it's even though we said it's no Republicans ever won the White House without
Judy,
it.
Excuse me.
State
This is. I know it sounds like I'm being rude, but we have a call to make, and it is a significant one. In the state of Virginia, former Governor George Allen has defeated and unseated Senator Charles Robb. Charles Robb, a 2-term senator, former governor, once thought to be possible presidential material, involved in various personal problems several years ago, barely beat Oliver North in a very hot race in '94. This time, George Allen has defeated him, and this represents a pickup, and a significant one, because it makes the Democrats' attempt to capture the Senate that much harder. Their most vulnerable incumbent has fallen.
And that means the Democrats have picked up a seat in the Senate in Florida. The Republicans have picked up a Senate seat by defeating Senator Robb in Virginia, so they're even Steven as of right now.
And since it's a 54-46 majority,
that's a good news for the
Democrats'
Republicans.
road got tougher.
Quite an upset there. Son-in-law, the late President Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Married to Linda Johnson.
Chuck Robb.
This is a race, of course, we see many of the ads because, three of us live in Washington, D.C. One of us lives in New York. You don't see as many of these.
The heartland.
Right, the heartland of America, Manhattan, West 57th Street.
Something.
And some of us were born in Virginia.
But we've been seeing a lot of the ads, and they've been some very tough ones in the Robb Allen race. You know, there are many people who said that Chuck Robb in this campaign never really seemed to many people like he wanted it. Now, you know, I'm not comfortable saying that from here, but I think it was something that the analysts...
well, remember, Virginia has become more and more solidly Republican over the years, and I mean, the legislature is predominantly Republican. Now they have 2 Republican senators. The governor has been Republican for some time. Virginia has been one of the southern states that's really drifted into the GOP.
And I think it's fair to say that in 94, it was often said that Robb and Oliver North were each running against the only person they could conceivably beat that year. And in fact, now that Chuck Robb has faced a stronger incumbent, remember in 94 there was an independent Republican that ran against North with the blessing of the other Senator John Warner. This time the Republicans were united and they took it.
Well, since we have some electoral goodies on the table, let's reset the table and take a look at how the balance of power is shaping up at this hour on Capitol Hill. And Wolf Blitzer's here in our election night newsroom to keep us up to date. Wolf?
Bernie, with that Republican pickup in Virginia and the Democratic pickup in Florida, let's take a look at the new balance of power in the U.S. Senate. The numbers are as follows. Democrats, of course, need 5 in order to carry that, to become the majority in the U.S. Senate. We're waiting for those numbers. That's it. The numbers are even. There's no pickup right now because the Democrats have won 1 in the in Florida. The Republicans have won 1 in Virginia. No change so far. There are 2 Senate incumbents who have been reelected. We'd like to call those winners right now. Senator Mike DeWine of Ohio, the Republican, reelected over Ted Celeste. Robert Byrd, the Democrat in West Virginia, the longtime senator, reelected in West Virginia. No great surprises in those 2 races, Stuart Rothenberg. But the Chuck Robb defeat in Virginia is somewhat of a surprise.
Two points. Well, first, in the Florida race, I think the Republicans knew McCollum was behind. They were hoping that he would slide through with getting a draft from George W. Bush. Obviously, that hasn't happened in Florida with the presidential race too close to call. And in Virginia, you know, that's a smaller version of the presidential race. George Allen, a former governor, talked about big government versus small government, very likable, personable guy. Chuck Robb said he could win this election on issues like guns and health care, education. Didn't work out that way. We'll have to see whether it works out that way at the presidential race.
Let's take a look at the House of Representatives, an important race in Kentucky. We're now ready to call Ann Northup the winner, the Republican, over Eleanor Jordan in a tough race. Why was this one so closely watched, Stuart Rothenberg?
Because the Democrats threw everything but the kitchen sink at Ann Northup. The AFL-CIO was in there very early, advertising very heavily, all Democratic groups. And Wolf, Democrats believe that they're going to have to knock off a handful of Republican incumbents if they're going to take over the House. They thought Ann Northup was in that group. They fell short there.
In the balance of power in the House of Representatives, still no change, no pickups as of right now. The Republicans have won 12. The Democrats have won 8, 1 independent. It stays as it was before. Let's take a look at the gubernatorial race in North Carolina. We're now ready to call Mike Easley, the Democrat, reelected over Richard Vinroot in North Carolina, and too close to call in West Virginia, Cecil Underwood, challenged by Bob Wise. These gubernatorial races, there are 11. Some of them do suggest some national implications.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you can't talk about governors in terms of the balance of the power the way you can in the House and the Senate. But let's remember that governors appoint senators if there's a vacancy. We've had some of that recently. They're involved in redistricting and reapportionment, and could be involved in the 2004 presidential race. So governors matter.
So as of right now, Stuart Rothenberg, if we look at the balance of power in the Senate, the House of Representatives, it's basically going as a lot of people, including yourself, had thought would be the case.
At the moment, the election is a status quo election. There are plenty of contests to go. And in fact, for the Democrats in the House, they're looking toward the West Coast, California, Utah, Washington State for big wins there. So we have to wait till we get to a couple more time zones.
Opportunities primaries for 4 or 5 potential pickups in California alone for the Democrats.
Right. Clearly, Kentucky has been a good state for the Republicans this year in the congressional races and the presidential. Let's look elsewhere.
Stuart Rothenberg will be back to you. Back to Bernie on the National Desk.
And our election night coverage will continue when we come back.
Leon Harris reporting here live from CNN Interactive, where tonight what we've done is we've constructed our website here in a way that's going to allow you to cover this very close election as it unfolds across the country in a very unique way. Go to our website at CNN.com, and what you'll find there is You Decide the States feature, where you get to pick which states you think Al Gore or George W. Bush will win. You select the state, you select the winner of that state, the colors will change, and you can compare it to the map on the right, which shows you the actual winners of the states, and in the end, you get the final tally and find out whether or not you were right. You don't win anything, except maybe a little pride. Now, back to the National Desk for more coverage.
All right, sorry, we're so carried away with what's going on tonight. We want to talk about it with everybody. Hal Bruno is with us once again to take a look at some of those states that we can't call yet. Hal, over at your map.
Judy, let's take a look at two states that right now are too close to call. That's Ohio and West Virginia, and the battle within the battle for the Ohio River Valley. Now, let's take a look at Ohio first. The good news for George Bush in the early returns is that Al Gore is not doing as well as a Democrat has to do up in Cuyahoga County, which is Cleveland. He's underperforming there. The worrisome news for George Bush is over here in Cincinnati, which is the Republican stronghold. Bush is not doing as well as he should do in the early returns. In order to win this state, the Republican has to be real strong in Cincinnati and all through central Ohio. The Democratic strength is up here in the north. Now let's take a look at West Virginia. You know what? West Virginia, 3 times in the last 50 years, it's voted Republican. It's the most Democratic state in presidential campaigns, but not tonight. It's still too close to call, but the bad news for Al Gore is down here in the coal mining regions in the Southwest. Al Gore is not running as well as a Democrat has to run. And the contrast is that George Bush so far is doing well over here in Huntington and in Charleston. Now, Bill Schneider was right on the money when he was talking about the economy versus the environment in West Virginia. Down here in the southwest part of West Virginia, that's where they do mountaintop mining. And the people down there were very concerned that Al Gore's environmental policies would hurt their economy. They also were concerned about his policies regarding Appalachian coal, which is high sulfur burning. Gore tried to explain he was going to penalize the power plants, not the mines. The other big fight in West Virginia was between the NRA and the United Mine Workers. The United Mine Workers is all out for Al Gore, but the NRA was fighting against that because the miners down in West Virginia, they like their guns and they like to hunt.
Hal, it sounds like you're describing exactly with real votes what our Bill Schneider was describing, that when you pull a union vote, you think you're pulling a Democratic vote, but if the social issues are bothering them, if the Democrats are on the wrong side from their point of view on the social issues, those union votes are going to be pulled and they're not going to vote for the Democrat. You think that's what's going on in the Southwest that you were pointing to?
It's exactly what's going on throughout the Ohio River Valley, Jeff, and it's not only the social issue, it's also that all-important economic issue of jobs. The same thing has happened in eastern Kentucky and to a certain extent down in southwest Pennsylvania. So that's why I call it the battle for the Ohio River Valley.
But Hal, I have to ask you, you know, this is a state that Bill Clinton won twice. Is there that much difference between how these people perceive Bill Clinton and Al Gore?
Yes, Judy, there is a big difference because with Bill Clinton, the environment was not the major issue that it's been for Al Gore throughout his political career. He is seen as the environmental man. And in West Virginia, that is causing a lot of worries. It's still a battleground. It's still too close to call, but there's no doubt that Al Gore has trouble there.
As part of that trouble, Al Bruno, the millions and millions of dollars thrown into this battle by the National Rifle Association.
And how? That's trouble with a capital T. As I said, the United Mine Workers Union went flat out for Al Gore in West Virginia, as it has in other states, Pennsylvania, for example. But the NRA was in there in force. I mean, Charleston Heston, Moses himself, was campaigning in West Virginia on the gun issue.
All right, Al Bruno, and there's much more we want to talk to you about tonight. I'm tempted to ask you about Ralph Nader and what he says about there's no difference between the candidates. We can save that for later. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Larry King with the man who ran on the Republican ticket for president 4 years ago, Bob Dole. A big call to make. CNN announces that we call Florida in the Al Gore column. This is a state both campaigns desperately wanted to win. The state of Florida fought over very hard. The state with the Republican governor named Bush, the brother of the Republican nominee, Jeff Greenfield. This is something that is not making the Bush campaign happy tonight.
This is a roadblock the size of a boulder to George W. Bush's path to the White House. They had counted these 25 electoral votes from the moment George Bush entered the campaign before he was even nominated. Democrats have a very tough time in Florida, whether it was Social Security, the turnout, Joe Lieberman. Now, George W. Bush has to look to Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and those smaller states really become critical.
There's a disagreement we've been hearing, at least what we're hearing out of the Bush campaign. We can ask Candy Crowley and others about this later. There were those. Karl Rove, who's been the chief strategist for Al Gore, for George Bush, said the other day, Candy, are you available? We want to ask, I'll ask you this question. Karl Rove was telling us, I saw was quoted just the other day as saying that there were a number of ways they could win this election without Florida. Do they still believe that's the case?
They still believe that's the case. As easily as about 10 minutes ago, I asked, look, do you really think you can win this without Florida? And they say yes, and run down a long list of states that they have to have. But boy, you begin to look at those other big battleground states, Pennsylvania, Missouri, Michigan, they become so much more important now. This is a huge problem here, but they have said for the past couple of days, look, we think we can win this without Florida. Nonetheless, they spent the 24 of the last 48 hours of the campaign in Florida. That's how important it was to them, so this is not a happy moment for the Bush campaign.
Candy, you've been with the campaign throughout the last year and more. Looking back, were there any warning signs in there?
Early on, they talked about how, Florida didn't lean that Republican. They got upset when we said, well, here's a state that leans Republican and Jeb Bush is the governor, therefore they should take it. They say, no, this is really tough for us. But it really was one that they counted in their column that they thought they could use as a base of votes from which to get to that magic 270. So they have said all along, we knew this was going to be tough. They knew the seniors and the Medicare issue and the Social Security issues were going to be tough for them because they knew that the Democrats had a very aggressive campaign out there, phone campaigns and brochures talking about George Bush's Social Security issues, so they knew it was going to be tough. I do believe, though, up till this very moment, they thought Florida would come their way.
John King, talk about the psychological warfare involved here. Here you have Governor Bush, who went into Arkansas and Tennessee in an obvious effort to embarrass both men, favorite sons from those states, and also to try to convey the message of this will be the president, if he's elected, to bind up wounds and have dialogue. Psychologically, Al Gore seeing that happen, and yet he gets Florida tonight. Is this a shot in the arm for the Gore campaign?
It certainly is, Bernie, and the first big surprise of the night, what the Gore campaign would tell you is despite the spin from the Bush camp that those trips to Tennessee and Arkansas were not psychology, they were simple mathematics, that the Bush camp realized Florida was slipping away, and realized it had to find 25 electoral votes elsewhere. Now, the Gore campaign entered the night thinking they would win 15 states and the District of Columbia solid. We should make clear that includes Pennsylvania and Michigan. They're confident they're going to win those, although our early information is that those states are very tough battlegrounds. But if they won those 15 and the District of Columbia, that gets them to 227 electoral votes, 43 shy. You throw in 25 from Florida, just 18 shy now. They have to look for those other 18 votes, assuming they win all the rest of their targets. This, a major boost for the Gore campaign, a cheer going up here in Nashville, a small crowd outside. But as the projections are being made and the calls being made, you hear the gasp and the cheers. The biggest cheer of the night just moments ago when we called Florida for the vice president. 25 big electoral votes. We should note, although it was expected to go Republican because of Governor Jeb Bush, Bill Clinton did win the state back in 1996. And as we see these other states, the dynamic Hal Bruno, Bill Schneider have been talking about, many Democrats say that what we're seeing here is areas with more suburbs. And Florida is a growing suburban state, tend to be trending Democratic. The old, reliable Democratic states with rural areas, they tend to be trending Republican.
All right, John King, Candy Crowley, we'll be back to you later, but right now we want to go quickly to Washington, where our Larry King is with Bob Dole. Larry.
Okay, Senator, what do you make of this?
Well, in '96, when I saw Florida come in, we knew we were behind, but I think somebody said in the program here, that's why Bush was going to Arkansas and Tennessee and other states, because I think he knew that this was going to be one way or the other, very, very close. They can still get there, but this certainly makes it tough.
The way John King just ran it down, if the Democrats get Pennsylvania and Michigan on top of this, and we're going to have 16 states reporting at the top of the hour, is this going to be an all-night horse race?
If they get Michigan and Pennsylvania, well, then it gets real tough, because you got Ohio right now too close to call, West Virginia. It's going to take a lot of those small states, like what you're going to have Missouri, you're going to have Wisconsin, you're going to have Iowa. states that we haven't had in the past few elections. But it's a very close race. I mean, I think...
What surprised you tonight so far?
Well, I just sort of felt like everybody else with Jeb Bush as governor, and Florida, I know it's Social Security, it's a lot of different things in that state, but I thought Bush would eke it out. But it didn't happen. That doesn't mean it's over. So my view is they've got to be very disappointed. But the fact that even New Hampshire, even though it's only 4 electoral votes, has come in for Bush is encouraging because, in my view, the newspaper up there, the Union Leader, has driven a lot of Republicans out of the party, moderate Republicans. But to come back and win that state and what the margin was, now if they can win Maine and some other small states, but it takes quite a while to add up to 25.
And how about your old bailiwick, the Senate? How does that look? So far, it's they've lost one, Democrats have lost one, Republicans have lost one.
We pick up one in Virginia. We lose, we lose one in Florida. I understand some others are very close. I don't think it would happen. We'd have to lose a number of seats. And, of course, if Gore and Lieberman win, then we pick up one in Connecticut. So it could end up 50-50, but we'd still win because Lieberman would have to exit the Senate, and we'd pick up a seat there.
What is overall this tell? Does this tell us that this is a country in division or close to the middle?
I think it maybe a little of each. I mean, we're obviously divided, but I think we are fairly close. I think the fringe candidates... Buchanan is hardly registering. Nader not doing as well as anticipated. And I don't say, he has some pretty good ideas. I watched him on your show just last week. But I think most people find themselves in they're moderate. They're moderate conservatives, moderate liberals. But I think most of them are in the center. That's what Eisenhower always preached back when he was president of the United States. So
and what about the House?
I think the House, we could pick up a few seats. We've seen a few of these. I haven't seen the whole list, but in Kentucky, for example, 2 Republican seats were in danger. They prevailed. I haven't seen other races, but I think overall they're... And keep your eye on Nebraska for a Senate seat. I think it's a dead heat about now. Governor Nelson was heavily favored, but it's a big Republican state. Bush will win by a big margin. Might be a pickup, and we may need it if we lose to some of the others.
Are you surprised at the apparent strong showing of Hillary? We have no story yet, but apparently there's a strong showing and a big turnout in the city.
I understand there's a big turnout in the city. I think she was favored to win. I don't know. I haven't even heard a number on that race. The last time I heard it was about 4 or 5 points, maybe even greater or less. But, she goes in there not only with the Clinton name, sort of a celebrity status, but the president's very popular there. She's very popular in New York. She picked a good state to run in.
Should the vice president have used President Clinton more in your political...
Well, I think if he wins, the answer is obvious. If he loses, the answer is obvious. So
either way,
happens,
right? We'll have the answer at the end.
Because it's going to be scapegoating time. And one thing I've said, I'm glad that when the election's over, they won't be talking about the last election. That's the one I was in. They'll be talking about this election.
Thanks so much, Al.
Thank you.
Always great to see you, Bob. I called you Al already.
That's all right. That's close enough.
Well, you know him. Right. Senator Bob Dole, the presidential nominee, former vice presidential nominee as well of the Republican Party. As we throw you back to Atlanta, we're going to have 16 states in the District of Columbia checking in. We'll have projections and maybe standoffs. Stay tuned to CNN throughout the night. Back to Atlanta for more coverage.
From CNN Center in Atlanta, coverage of Election 2000 continues. Here again, Judy Woodruff, Bernard Shaw, Jeff Greenfield, and Bill Schneider.
It is 8 o'clock on the East Coast, 16 states. The polls have closed, the District of Columbia, and we have an important call to make in the state of Michigan. But we're showing you Texas. No surprise there, George Bush wins. The stunner at this hour is that we can call Al Gore the winner in the Wolverine state.
This is the state where Reagan Democrats were born, working-class people who went Republican on values issues and then on the economy and then on strength. Clinton got them back in 92 and 96. A bitterly contested state. Al Gore takes it, and the map for George Bush gets even tougher.
In the state of Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, too close to call at this hour, still being battled out by the Vice President and Governor Bush.
Another one, this one Bush, it looks like is going to have to win to build his margin.
In Illinois, Missouri, too close to call. This one and we're skipping ahead to Illinois. Al Gore, the winner there.
These Midwest battleground states, which George Bush's campaign thought they were going to be very competitive in, they haven't won one yet. And with Michigan and Illinois and Pennsylvania too close to call, but you add Michigan and Illinois to Florida, and Al Gore's people must be feeling very good about now.
And again, in the state of Missouri, it's 11 electoral votes still being fought out. This is a state where the governor running for the Senate, Mel Carnahan, killed tragically in a plane crash. Through this whole election in this state, really upside down for some time.
And again, this is one of those states we always point to because except for 1956, it has gone with the winner in every election since 1900.
In New Jersey, CNN able to say that Al Gore is the winner. George Bush was in there campaigning this very weekend. But it appears that Al Gore has won New Jersey and it's 15 electoral votes. Massachusetts, no surprise, a state the Democrats can count on in just about every election you can think of. Al Gore winning and taking its 12 electoral votes. The state of Tennessee, it's Al Gore's home state, but he is not able to count on it. Jeff Greenfield, it's too close to call.
But again, in the Bush calculation, when they told us, well, we can win without Florida, a state like Tennessee was one of the states they had in mind. He went there, kind of drew a line in the sand, said Al Gore may win Washington, D.C., but he's not winning Tennessee. We can't say one way or the other, but if this one doesn't fall for Bush, it's trouble.
Maryland, the free state, reliably Democratic, and Al Gore wins that, takes its 10 electoral votes. Alabama, a state I guess we thought George Bush we'd be able to say at this hour, another one too close to call. Connecticut, Al Gore, the winner in the Constitution state, and its 8 electoral votes. Oklahoma, its 8 electoral votes go to Texas Governor George W. Bush, the governor of the neighboring state of Texas. Mississippi, another win for the Texas governor, and its 7 electoral votes. Kansas, Bob Dole's home state, we just heard from him, solidly in George Bush's corner, and its 6 electoral votes. Up in the far northeastern corner of the United States, Maine, its 4 electoral votes still up for grabs, still being battled out between Gore and Bush. And finally, the nation's capital, the District of Columbia, no surprise at all, Al Gore the winner. And finally, Delaware in this 8 o'clock count, Al Gore the winner. That is a state where George Bush had been making threatening noises, but it looks like Al Gore has called it. Here is how, and we want to add that we are able at this hour to say the state of North Carolina is in George Bush's corner. This is a poll that closed about half an hour ago in North Carolina, and its 14 electoral votes go to George Bush. Looking at the map, the national map at this hour, you need 270 to win to become president. At this hour, it couldn't be any closer. I guess it could be by 2 votes. But Bush has 121, Al Gore at 119. It is a cliffhanger, gentlemen.
Very much so. Just a quick observation. Before that observation, exit polling from you, Bill Schneider?
Well, we do. We have some exit polling from the state of Michigan. The AFL-CIO endorsed Al Gore back in October, and that was a critical factor in his victory in Michigan. I should add, by the way, that some of those... All right, well, here we have the vote among union household voters in Michigan, and as you can see, the unions delivered big time. 2-1 for Al Gore over George W. Bush, and union households made up 42% of the voters in Michigan. Gore's big victory in Michigan was a union victory. Sweet victory for Al Gore, sweet victory for John Sweeney and the AFL-CIO. Now, what happened in Florida? Well, there we had a lot of new residents move there, getting new jobs. We found that among voters in Florida, that those who said their family finances were better voted very heavily for Al Gore. They were crucial in Gore's carrying the state of Florida because 54% of the voters of Florida said their finances had improved over the last 4 years. So clearly, the improvement in the economy in Florida, the fact that they came there, those new residents looking for jobs paid off big time for Al Gore.
And remember, early tonight, one of the keys we asked is, was it the economy, stupid? I think what you're telling us, I mean, you can speak for yourself, is that in Florida and Michigan, those union members that had been lost to the Democratic Party all through the 80s and came back hoping that Clinton would make things better for them, it seems that it was the economy, stupid or intelligent, but at any event, in both those states, the union members and people who thought their incomes were better went solidly for Gore, may help make the difference.
Observation about the Midwest, staying in the Midwest, Illinois, my home state. With the vice president taking Illinois, the simple headline is that the brothers Daley came through for Al Gore. William Daley, the vice president's national campaign manager, Richard J. Daley, Richard M. Daley, the mayor of Chicago, they came through. There was some concern as recently as a month ago, but obviously the machine turned out.
And apparently all these voters were alive.
Yes,
that's right.
Wasn't always the case in Chicago.
Well, usually from Chicago we vote early and often. But
if the brothers Daley came through for Al Gore, the brother Bush did not come through for his brother, George W. Florida did not hold for his brother.
It's interesting, we talk about the unions, and you both have talked about the union vote. All this happening while union membership is declining in this country. So whatever the organized labor has to turn out in the United States these days, it has to work even harder.
And
because as a percentage of the workforce, organized labor is a smaller percentage than ever in history.
And that's why John Sweeney may be one of the people
Head of
to
the
whom Al Gore
AFL-CIO.
owes a great debt of gratitude. As was mentioned, he's the head of the AFL-CIO, committed to Gore when Bradley was still a threat last October, poured millions upon millions of dollars into male voter turnout. And if Al Gore were to win tonight, that's a long way away, John Sweeney is someone who's going to be at that table in January.
Can you think of the agony and the anguish unfurling in the Bush camp and the Bush family? I can recall interviewing Prescott Bush, Jeb Bush's son, on Inside Politics, and I asked him,
George
what happens?
P.
Yes,
Right, George
what
P.
happens if your dad does not deliver for your uncle? And he said, well, we've told him that we're going to read him out of the party. He said, that's a joke. And we had Governor Bush over the past couple days referring to my little brother, saying that he's assured me that when it's all said and done, we're going to win in Florida. But this is a deep embarrassment.
Well, I think the question we have to ask now, with Florida gone, we've given Florida to Gore, we've given Michigan to Gore, Illinois we knew was going to happen. What is it that the Texas governor needs to do to put a victory together? And I think it gets much more problematical for him now that we know the numbers or the states are falling the way they are. In fact, Jeff Greenfield, do some quick calculating. I mean, what would George W. Bush have to do now, assuming these calls stay as they are, to put 270 together?
Well, Pennsylvania looms very large as one of the big battleground states that he has a shot in. And then you have to go down the middle of the country and pick up Arkansas, pick up Tennessee, pick up Missouri, later pick up Wisconsin, try for something in the Pacific Northwest, because that 270 electoral vote
Which
total
is not out of the realm of possibility.
It is not out of the realm of possibility. It just gets tougher.
And Judy, let me add that the Nader factor could loom large here, because in some of those states that are left that Al Gore hopes to pick up, like Wisconsin and Minnesota and Oregon and Washington, the Nader vote could be absolutely crucial. If he takes enough Democrats away from Al Gore, they could go for Bush.
And while we talk about the presidency, the Senate is up for grabs, and we have some calls to make, if you want to call them calls. Some of these calls are telling you that they're not calls. In Michigan, where Spencer Abraham is battling Congresswoman Debbie Stabenow, we say that race is too close to call. In New Jersey, where John Corzine, the Goldman Sachs executive who dumped $60 million of his own money into this race against Congressman Bob Franks, we are saying at this moment that race is too close to call. Probably one of the most watched Senate races, Senator John Ashcroft running against Governor Mel Carnahan, who died a couple of weeks ago in his plane crash. In a plane crash, his widow, Jean, says she would take the seat if Mel Carnahan gets more votes. That one is too close to call. Now, we are calling Joe Lieberman the winner in Connecticut, but of course, if Al Gore wins, Joe Lieberman will have to resign the Senate, but if not, he at least has a day job. Now, here is a pickup. In Delaware, Governor Thomas Carper has unseated Senator William Roth, a 30-year veteran of the United States Senate, chairman of the inevitably described powerful Senate Finance Committee. Age was a real issue in this race. Senator Roth had the misfortune to collapse while a TV camera was running. That is a pickup for the Democrats. Roth is out. One of the lions of the Senate gone.
All right, while we're looking at the Senate and some of these other very, very important elections taking place, let's go over to the man who's keeping a close eye on all this, our Wolf Blitzer. He's over there with Stu Rothenberg. Wolf?
Judy, with that pickup, that Democratic pickup in Delaware, the new balance of power in the Senate, let's take a look at where it stands right now. There were 35 Republican holdovers, 31 Democrats, 9 Republican winners tonight, 7 Democratic winners. That brings the new number now 44 in the Republican camp in the Senate. 38 Democrats will be in the Senate. At least 18 races still undecided. We have some other Senate races we're ready to call right now. All as predicted. Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison easily reelected in Texas. In Pennsylvania, Rick Santorum, the incumbent, easily reelected, defeating Ron Klink, the Democrat. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Senator Edward Kennedy easily defeats Jack E. Robinson as expected. In Tennessee, Bill Frist, Dr. Bill Frist, the incumbent, he is reelected in Tennessee. In Maryland, another easy race for Paul Sarbanes, the longtime incumbent, beating Paul Rappaport. In the state of Mississippi, the Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott, once again easily reelected. And in Maine, Senator Olympia Snowe, the Republican, moderate Republican, reelected once again. Stuart Rothenberg, there is a change, though, that we're seeing some changes in the U.S. Senate.
Yeah, we sure are, Wolf. Roth, as Jeff mentioned, a 5-term U.S. Senator, chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, a powerful political figure. Roth IRAs, many people know that, named after him. Tom Carper, however, was also a very established figure, is an established figure, much younger, 54 years old, was the at-large congressman, a state treasurer. Well-known figure. In fact, polls show that both men were highly regarded, but I have to mention, Wolf, that a year or two ago, there were a lot of Republican insiders who thought that maybe it'd be better if Senator Roth stepped aside. The Republicans nominated Mike Castle, a congressman, a former governor, that he would have a better chance of holding the seat. Roth didn't think so. They didn't.
All right, speaking of Delaware, we're ready to call the next governor of Delaware. Ruth Ann Minner, the Democrat, wins that open seat, defeating John Burris. And one important ballot initiative we're ready to call at this point right now. In Michigan, there was a very controversial voucher initiative that would have allowed vouchers, money, government money, to go to private parochial schools. That voucher initiative in Michigan, we're now saying will go down to defeat no vouchers in Michigan. Tell us why that's important.
Well, the vouchers would have given students about $3,100 under current figures for students in schools that had a low graduation rate. Senator John McCain actually cut a TV ad for the pro-voucher people. The Michigan Catholic Conference was supportive of the Michigan Chamber, but of course the Michigan Education Association was strongly opposed, spent a lot of money against it. And these voucher initiatives have very, very big problems when they get in front of the voters, and they seem to go down, and this one went down as well.
And there's another voucher initiative in California. We'll watch for that, but for now, back to Bernie on the National Desk.
Thanks very much. And quickly to Nashville, Tennessee, and Austin, Texas. In Austin, Candy Crowley covering the Bush headquarters there, and in Nashville, our man John King. As you know, the CNN Electoral College count stands at 121 for Governor Bush, 119 for Vice President Gore. John King, are things evolving the way your people there, you're covering, expected them?
Well, certainly the way they hoped, Bernie. They very much needed Florida, given Governor Bush's strength in places like West Virginia, Iowa, Wisconsin, traditionally Democratic states. So they very much needed Florida to offset that. We're told the vice president was having dinner with his wife and Senator Joe Lieberman and Hadassah Lieberman. When we called Florida and Michigan, we're told cheers went up throughout the room, some hugs and kisses around the room, then immediately back to work. Even at this hour, the vice president and Joe Lieberman still making telephone calls, we're told, into Missouri, into New Mexico, into Colorado. Also significantly, we should tell you, you were just discussing a few moments ago how indebted the vice president might be to organized labor if he pulls this off. The polls have closed in Ohio. I spoke moments ago to Steve Rosenthal, the national AFL-CIO political director. He said of phone banks in Cincinnati and in Cleveland, about 350 to 400 phones total. He says they have emailed them the lists of union members in New Mexico, Colorado, and Arizona. Those email lists get fed into the computers. The computers automatically begin dialing those union households, union workers in the Midwest, now trying to help the vice president throughout the mountain Southwest.
And Candy Crowley, to my original question, are things evolving tonight the way folks in the Bush camp are expecting?
I think you've got to look at both Florida and at Michigan and know that this is a disappointment for them. But I will also tell you that they talk a lot about, the changing strategy over the years, that yes, Florida was always considered something a Republican had to win, but they say the demographics have changed, people have moved, the states are different. Thus you see George Bush's strength in West Virginia and Iowa and all those states that John just mentioned. Can they win this without Florida and Michigan, which, as you know, we both declared for Al Gore? Bush strategists say absolutely. But clearly this is not an easy thing to do, and the focus becomes on Pennsylvania, on Missouri, on Wisconsin, on Minnesota, and slowly what we're getting down to is some real must-wins for George Bush.
Is Governor Bush still having dinner with his parents and his brother, the Florida governor?
Governor Bush was at dinner for about an hour with his family. He was supposed to watch the returns from a local hotel here, but we're now told that the governor will instead watch them at the governor's mansion. Read into that what you want. Just a change of plans here from the Four Seasons. Now he's going to watch the election returns at the governor's mansion.
Okay, thank you, Candy Crowley. John King. Outstanding reporting from John King and what the unions, AFL-CIO, is doing with their union members in the Midwest, operating phone banks, calling union members in the Southwest to get out the vote.
Great story to be written after this election about just exactly what the unions did. I think some of us reporters were onto it, but it's a much bigger story, I think, than perhaps anyone had realized. Tiny little omen here tonight. Omens are probably made to be broken. No Republican has ever won the White House yet without winning the state of Illinois. We've already called Al Gore the winner in Illinois. Again, these things are made to be broken, but we just point that out. We're going to take a break. When we come back, much, much more of our election coverage.
Coverage of Election 2000 is brought to you by Akamai and America's pharmaceutical companies. For expanded coverage, log on to CNN.com. Akamai, bringing you a better internet, and America's pharmaceutical companies.
The internet is faster because of us.
The internet is more reliable because of us.
The internet is growing because of us.
The internet is more exciting because of us.
The internet goes everywhere because of us.
The internet is better because of us.
Delivering the most content from the world's biggest network, Akamai.
This disease takes billions of healthy brain cells and slowly turns them into a tangled web. Alzheimer's disease destroys the mind and then it destroys the body. As many as 4 million Americans have it. When my grandmother got Alzheimer's disease, it was very tragic. She basically, within a period of a year, became incapacitated. Eventually, she lost the ability to speak English and reverted to Russian. At our pharmaceutical company, we're trying to remove the amyloid plaque from the brain of the Alzheimer patient. And we are developing a vaccine that activates the immune system to help remove that plaque. And we're very, very hopeful that that will work. My hope is that nobody's parent or grandparent will ever suffer from this disease again.
Got yourself into too much credit card debt? Why not point and click your way out of debt with a second mortgage from Ditech.com? Whether you have equity or no equity, good credit or not so good credit, Ditech has a second mortgage with absolutely no closing costs to help you lower your monthly payments now. So point and click your way out of high-interest, non-tax deductible credit card debt at Ditech.com or call us at 1-800-71-FIX.
Today's companies are moving at high speeds towards e-commerce solutions. Today's companies move to Ohio because E also means enterprise and expertise. Ohio is the E-Corridor, the place where Discover found the support to build a facility to process the transactions of 46 million card members.
Discover how Ohio's E-Corridor can help you locate or expand your business.
The future, your company's future, is in Ohio, the E-Corridor. Don't miss your stop.